Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to DM DMer. For any of you that have never listened to this show before, or indeed any existing fans who have just forgotten what my voice sounds like, my name is Nathan Peterson, and I am the host of this show. And essentially, the show is me just talking to other DMs about sort of anything. It evolved from being around TTRPG and DMing to sort of anything in their life that they find interesting and want to talk to me about. First things first, I want to apologise to anybody out there who has been sitting by the podcast phone waiting for episode 5 of DM DMer. Long story short, we were due to record this weeks and weeks and weeks ago. I unfortunately had some back issues, which meant I couldn't record. Then my guest is a super busy guy. I get pretty busy from time to time. We just couldn't find a suitable time to sit down and record. I think we even may have delayed for a second health issue. But the good news is it's done. It's in the bag. You're about to listen to it, and it's a cracking show. So who do we talk to? We have Mike from... I nearly forgot his name there. That's terrible, isn't it? We've got Mike from the Billowing Hilltop on for this episode of DM and DMer. And Billowing Hilltop is a fantastic podcast. If you've not listened to it yet, it's an actual play podcast. It's a group of friends, Mike plus his cohorts that he's been playing with for many, many years. They've got great chemistry. There's something a little bit... I get into the podcast. There's something a bit old-fashioned about them, but in the very possibly best way. I compared them to the Goodies at one point, and it's got that sort of old British comedy feel about it, and I think it's fantastic. I think it's unique in terms of the shows I've listened to. I've not heard anything else like it. I absolutely give it as much recommendation as I possibly can. It's one of my favourites that I've listened to, so please do go and check out Billowing Hilltop if you can. In this episode of DM and DMer, we obviously get into Billowing Hilltop. We touch very lightly on TTRPGs. This episode, I mean, if you're a podcaster, this episode is going to be quite nerdy and right up your alley, because I think we spend over an hour just talking about the podcasting process. This show gets derailed quite quickly, quite early about technical rubbish. And I somehow try to wrestle it away, and I don't think I ever really truly did. It's a mishmash. I blame it on a bit of ring rustiness. I've not done this show for quite a long time, and I've obviously forgotten what I was supposed to be talking about. There you go. But the show is there. It's done. It's in the bag. You're about to listen to it. Mike is a fantastic, very entertaining guy, and hopefully you enjoy this. And if you do, like I say, go and head over and listen to their show. But before you listen to their show, listen to this show. Over to me. Oh, there he is.
Now recording.
What a creepy son of a bitch.
That sound. Do you use Jark as well or not?
Yeah.
Because always. That makes me feel a bit more confident. Jark's always a little bit more reliable.
Yeah. I've not had major issues with Craig, to be fair. But the problem is when it does have issues, it's just annoying. Like the last show I did with Hamilton from Dragon's Duel. There would be gaps in between words. So literally, for some reason, I'm halfway through a sentence, and it's not like it doesn't. There he is. It's not like it didn't. It's not like it doesn't record. It's literally like the word is split, and there's this big gap of silence that I've got to then trim back down somehow. It can be very frustrating. But there you go. If Zen works, and I like the look of Zen, then I'll see about moving over.
Well, so the way that Zen works is it records locally. It's recording into your browser. You're using Chrome, I presume, otherwise it wouldn't be working. And it spools that, so it records locally, and then it spools what it records. It streams to the server. Yeah. So if your internet connection is poor, the only thing that's affected is its ability to upload your audio, not the actual audio itself. And that is how you get. So we struggled forever with sound quality. We were using Craig on Discord, and if somebody had, twitchy internet connection,
Yeah.
the editing process basically turned into this thing, which was not fun at all. It was just a technical process where you went in and just fixed stuff that you couldn't hear properly.
Hmm.
And it was driving us crazy. And we found Zen. I found Zen because I was interviewed on another a podcast called The Ironbound Chest. Have you heard of The
Yes.
Ironbound Chest? Right.
Yes.
So
Yes.
very nice guy, Austin. And I had a long chat, and he used Zen, and I was like, "Well, what is this sorcery?" And he said, "Well, basically the thing about it is that you don't have to worry about the internet quality, and the massive bonus is that it's got an auto post-production algorithm thing that runs,
Mm.
goes through all the tracks that you record independently, balances the levels against each other, does the EQ, has a noise gate which removes sort of snuffles and bits and bobs. It's not perfect, and then
Yeah.
it gives you a fixed file that you can then use, and that obviously saves us. Well, I think it used to be that there's two of us there's two of us edit, right? And we used to just grumble, and it used to take us forever, and it was mostly fixes. And now we enjoy it, and it's speedy. I can do one in a week with a couple of sessions, sitting down for a couple of hours each time, and I got one done.
Nice. We've it's now I don't know whether to do this or not actually. I was this show doesn't have like a proper opening anymore, or like a proper introduction where I say, "Hey, this is Mike
I was
from
going to
blah
say
blah
hello,
blah."
everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know whether to. I feel like the show might have started. I feel like let's just flow into it. Let's just go into it. We can go from that. We'll talk
Yeah,
about
yeah.
We'll talk about TTRPGs and the actual DMing and all that sort of side of life at the moment. This is podcasting. This is just podcast basics.
Yeah, I've learned. I did a thing. This here you want. I'm very good at looking a fool, and one of the things that I've done that has made me look a fool is when we first started. There's a thing called Geek Native, which is like an online RPG zine kind of hobby thing, and there's
Yeah.
a Twitter account, and I don't know why, and I can't remember how it happened, but basically, there's a guy called Andrew Girdwood who runs it. Seems like a very nice chap. And I agreed to do 10 tips for starting a podcast, like what I've learned starting a podcast. I did actually look back at it I mean, this is 2 years ago. And it's like, what an idiot. I mean, don't listen to any of this. Honestly, so now I would write a very different thing, put it that way.
But it's like everything, isn't it? It's an ever learning process. I'm sure that when you did that article, that was what felt right to you. But obviously since then you've learned new things, and obviously technology is moving ever faster. Like Discord's obviously been around for a while,
Yeah.
but it's fair to say its usage over the last 12 months has probably
Oh,
skyrocketed
yeah.
because of things like D&D, but generally, I mean, I obviously know about it being used because of D&D and
Mm.
podcasts and various other things. But I'm sure there's other types of podcasts or other types of online
It's
interaction.
Call of Duty. That's what I mean. It's not just Call of Duty. If I know, I mean, if I've picked up the right end of the stick with Discord, it's a gaming community chat site that's really for what we would call, because we're old, video games. But other people will just call games. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's for that, and it just so happens that it's absolutely fantastic for playing D&D online.
Yep.
I mean, that's just, and now I kind of live in Discord.
Yeah, I'm see. How confident are you with Discord
I haven't got a
as a
fucking
whole?
clue. I haven't got a clue how any of it works. I honestly, I find the entire thing very intimidating. I set it up thinking, hey, look what I found. I found this really whizzy modern technical solution. And I kind of got the rest of our group to sign up, get accounts. We created a couple of chat rooms, like audio chat rooms, like we're in at the moment. Yeah. We don't use the video because, well, we already know what each other look like. And we worked out that we could record it. And we're like, okay, well, that's all we need. I've since been invited to Discord servers by other people who say, hey, join our Discord server. And I've gone in and I'm like, what the fuck is everybody talking about? Right? What are all these weird little blobs and colors and little badges and lines and stuff? And I'm like, I don't understand this. I just thought it was like a chat room and that's it.
Yeah.
That's what. So immediately I feel inadequate. Well, we were invited. I've never been back since. Maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. I should get into this. The Paizo partner Discord, right?
Ooh.
I know. I got an invite. It's like, join the Paizo partner Discord. We'd love to see you. And I went in. There's like 200 other people. The first show of Big Brother when they open the bedrooms and they all go in at once and they all start running around. It's like that in there, right? I went in there and all these people are like, oh my God, we've been invited into this amazing world. And it became increasingly clear to me that there was nothing special about being invited to the Paizo Discord, and B, I hadn't got any Scooby about what was going on. They were just talking in a language, and not even talking in a language, they were talking in a medium that I didn't understand, let alone the language. I should go back in.
You should. You never know. How long ago was that you were invited to that?
Oh, about a couple of months ago. The idea is there's this
Oh,
concept of the Paizoverse. Have you heard of the Paizoverse? It's a
I
hashtag.
haven't.
Have you heard of
I've not.
hashtags?
I've heard of hashtags. Yes.
Because tangentially, what our little phrase is, if there is a bright center to the Paizoverse, you're on the planet that is farthest from, which is that we are playing on our show. We're playing a Paizo adventure path, but it's from 2005. So it's from before Pathfinder. It's from before any of that. So there's absolutely no leverage. There's nothing. They're not interested in us. They don't give a toss, right? They don't care. But they've been nice to us, and a couple of people who kind of follow Paizo related stuff have picked up. If you search, I don't know if it's true anymore. If you search for Paizo on Spotify, we're like we're like the number one result in podcasts, which used to make me blow beer out of my nose when I found that out. It's because of our bio, and the Paizo is an odd word, right? That's all it is. It's nothing to do with our content. It's nothing to do with us at all.
But surely with Pathfinder, there's other podcasts that would be more relevant, more sizable.
Many more. Glass
Yeah.
Cannon, like for example.
Yeah. Exactly.
Roll for Combat, Androids and Aliens. I mean, there's a millions of them, but for some reason we did very well. We did well. Yeah, I mean, I did check recently because we are. I don't know if you have problems with Spotify uploading to Spotify. Do you find that your shows just appear on Spotify really late? We had an issue the other day, and I, as a result, went on and did a quick search for us to see if I could find if our thing had come up. And I don't think we're top anymore, but it used to make me laugh. We were number one. Glass.
You're not, but you are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th. You are you're still in the top 5, which is quite considerable considering.
Bearing in mind that we don't exaggerate when we say that we have 8 readers. Yeah. It still tickles me that we're somehow up there in the. It's the very idea that somebody would be like, "Hey, Paizo, they're cool. I'm going to search and see if there's any podcasts that they do, right?" And scroll through, and it's like, "I've heard of the Glass Cannon. I'm already listening to that. Who are these guys?" And then they would somehow stumble across the absolute car crash. It's a whole show.
They're only slightly less popular than the Glass Cannon. They must be good.
Yeah, precisely. They're just under them. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's marvelous. Anyway, sorry, distracted.
I was going to say I was going to come back to Discord very briefly. Just I'm very much like you. Like I like to think of myself as being, fairly tech savvy, fairly, an adopter of geekery when it comes to technology.
Yeah.
But Discord just blows my mind. Like I find that whenever I've been invited to and joined servers, they range from dead. Yeah. Like you go in there and no one's doing anything. Like ours, we set one up.
Yeah.
We set one up very early in our journey, and with my me more than anyone journey, with my intention to make it something like you see other people use, but then realised I was way out of depth with it. It's just not for me. And then I go into someone else's, like I've been in the Royal Britannia one for example, and it is just room after room after room. Oh yeah, I've been there, sir.
Have you?
And it is just people talking non-stop. There's no way, even if I knew what they were talking about, there's no way I could keep track of everything that's going on in every. Not that I need to keep track in every single room because some of them might not relate.
It's what's the word? It's shop talk basically, isn't it? I mean, it's people. Well, it's not shop talk. It's people talking in an ergot in a language with lots of sort of internal referencing that if you're not part of, you're like, I mean, it's like basically a dad with a load of teenagers.
Yeah.
As in, they're chatting about stuff, and you just don't understand what they're talking about. And when I was a teenager, I mean, I have to say I was a particularly kind of well-behaved and boring teenager, but there was the idea that you were a close community and that you would adopt your own language and kind of idiom in order to communicate and kind of form a sense. And I think that what happens with online communities is you're just bound to get the same thing. Add to that the fact that the medium, that the technology can be a little bit intimidating because there's just too many buttons and switches and bits. Yeah, and an old fart like me, I'm just like, yeah. Who are these?
Yeah.
Who is this One Direction a group that you talk of?
I don't think I've ever talked of One Direction, so I feel offended that you would suggest I
There's
would.
an interesting thing about that I heard, by the way, very briefly. Do you know this concept that the High Court judge says, "Who are these Beatles of which you speak?" It's like a classic kind of idea. Apparently, it's because if there's a cultural reference, the judge is mandated to ask in court for it to be explained, because the record, you cannot assume that the record is going to right is right that the person reading it in 10 years time is
Yeah,
going
of
to
course.
understand what it is.
Yeah, because obviously something like the Beatles, everyone is going to know that, and I'm not saying that they still shouldn't do it, but everyone's going to know that. But if someone references somebody who's popular now, there's nothing to suggest that 10 years, 20 years from now, exactly.
Who is this
I did not know
Cheryl
that.
Cole? I did. It could be complete bollocks, by the way, but it's still, and it's interesting bollocks, and like my bollocks. No, I didn't mean that. Anyway.
It makes sense. Well, this has been a chaotic start, hasn't it?
Sorry.
No, good. If anything, that's what I want. I want chaos in the most possible way, and that's what you're bringing. So Zencastr, it seems we're doing podcasting and talking about it. So, you enjoy the editing now? Did you say? Is that?
Yes, I do. I mean, the thing with editing is, do you do editing? Do you edit your own?
I edit this.
Right.
But the main show, no. And from everything I've heard, I wouldn't want to, because the number of voices and the number of tracks. So just to give you an idea of what we do, we may have discussed this before or not, I don't know. But what we tend to do, we don't even use Discord for our podcast. We actually use Skype. We tried using Discord recently, and it just completely crashed on us. Not even Craig, the whole of Discord crashed on us. So we basically call each other through Skype. And then we record that as a backup, but our main recordings are done on our own systems with Audacity or GarageBand or whatever everyone's got on their own computer.
Yeah.
We then
and they just
submit. Yeah, we submit that to Luke, who basically then just ties it all together and edits it. And he does a fantastic job, wonderful job every week. I've tried editing. We did a one shot just before Christmas. With the intention of releasing it as like a bonus thing. And I started trying to edit that recently and got about half an hour in, and it absolutely completely killed my energy whatsoever, and I've not touched it since. So having to do the main show would be the absolute worst thing I could think of right now. This is fine.
I'd love to talk to Luke.
Let me see if he's free. But no, he does a wonderful job. And yeah, I fear for him some weeks, because obviously, our group can be quite chaotic and they can do some stupid things, and you sort of think, every now and again someone will say, "Oh, that's all right, Luke will sort that in the edit." And you go, "No, I don't think he wants to do that."
If we're running exactly the same. If we're running a session and I just think, "Oh dear," that's most of the time somebody will just say, "Don't worry about that, we'll fix that later." And most of the time you can, but I mean, it really is a thing. It's a thing that you get into. When you first start, you have no idea what you're doing, obviously. When you get into it, you start to learn little tricks of the trade. Audacity is your friend. I wouldn't like to have to sync up independently recorded tracks like that, because do you do a clap?
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a clap at the end and a clap at the beginning, which is what a lot of people have to do a bit of stretching and kind of juggling to make sure that they all work together. I wouldn't want to have to do that. So if you take a Craig recording, you don't need to do that. And if you take a Zen recording, you don't need to do that. And the thing about Zencastr, by the way, dear listeners who have no idea what we're talking about, is that it records independent tracks and then does all the mixing for you. So you don't have to worry about any of that. You just pull the completed tracks into Audacity, and then it's all about tidying, and then it becomes fun. So in the early days, it was all about fixing. It was a very technical process, right? It was scrubbing out audio that hadn't worked properly. It was 75% technical fixes and 25% fun, creative. Like, would it be more fun if this joke landed in this way, or this bit where they talk about this thing? This makes much more sense at the beginning, or something like that, right? Or to putting in backgrounds and stuff.
Wow. So
Now it's the other.
Just on that point, so you would you actually edit the show so that certain sections came before they actually happened, or vice versa?
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Do it all the time. Yeah. That's why our show flows so beautifully. Now, I try to think of an example. Okay, so here's the last. Well, I don't know when this will come out, but that we released a show this week, and we got into a process when we were playing. So okay, so I'm not explaining myself very well. The rule that we have, the golden rule, the unshakable rule, is play and record. And what I mean by that is that we don't shape or change our behavior because we're recording. We just play D&D. We've been playing D&D online for 10 years now, right? Something like that. When we all moved to different areas, a couple of people were abroad, our lives meant that we couldn't get together. So we started playing online. So we're kind of veteran online players. And we've been Roll20. I mean, people grumble about Roll20. Roll20 is nirvana compared to some of the things that there used to be out there, right? And so we play on Roll20, and we used to play on whatever chat we could find, Skype or something, and that used to be annoying. And then we found Discord, which we found more reliable. I know you don't. We don't use video. That massively helps because video is a nightmare in terms of bandwidth. So we've been playing forever. So we didn't think, let's work out how to play online and record it in order to make a show. We thought instead, what if we just started recording us playing on D&D like we always do? I wonder if you could go back afterwards and turn it into something that had some kind of, cogent, whatever, thread.
Yeah.
And it turns out that you can, but there's quite a lot of work to do in that. And for example, the show that came out this week, we were doing a bit, and then we just got on this massive tangent, which went off somewhere else. And then we came back, and something that we recorded earlier on was completely irrelevant unless you put that bit in. And we don't mind that we're having a conversation out of order when we're playing, because that's how real life works. But for somebody listening to it, reading it, as we call it, they would find it massively confusing. So you literally pick up a whole chunk of the playing session, and you move it back in time, and you slot it in the place that makes sense. And then the narrative makes sense. It all makes logical sense. Where for somebody who wasn't, right, we do that quite a bit. We chop out enormous amounts of an experience that you're about to have, Nate. Chop out enormous amounts of me, because I just talk forever, and DMs talk a lot anyway. So that's that's dreadful. So I just basically, there's a guy called Paul and I who share the editing. We just spend most of the time deleting my audio.
Oh, I mean, there will be, subject to you telling me there's certain sections you don't want recorded. This will all go in. I don't manage. Okay. I don't manage content. I manage quality. So it's I've had a couple of guests we've had on previously have said, "Oh, do you mind taking that bit out, or do you want to whatever?" So if there's anything you say tonight you want me to take out, that will come out. Otherwise, every single golden word out of your mouth, Mike, will be landing in people's ears.
Paul would just shudder at the very prospect. Anyway, so Zencastr, which is going back to where we were, because it does so much of the technical legwork for you before you even start. It's turned editing from a 75% technical, 25% creative to 75% creative, 25% technical. So there's a little bit of work to be done to scrub out the occasional glitch with bits and bobs, stuff that doesn't make sense, or a break where everybody wanders off and makes a cup of tea. Get rid of that kind of stuff. But mostly editing work now is how to make it sharp, right? Because people don't play D&D in a kind of crisp way. They play it in a chaotic stream of consciousness way. And what you want for something that some person who's crazy enough, to be honest, I mean, who are these people who download and listen to this? And we know there are. We think 8 to 10 people who do this, we feel it's incumbent on us to sort of tidy ourselves up a bit so that it makes some kind of vague sense. And also you have to get rid of the really disgusting stuff, obviously,
Obviously, I mean that is a genuine it's a worry. We've definitely had in our fledgling career. There's definitely been moments where we've had to the content has not been appropriate, and we've had to censor ourselves. We as a group, we know each other's sense of humours, we know each other's sensibilities, and most of us, are quite happy with the things that are sometimes said at the table. But every now and again, something will be said, and it'll be just like, we can't. There's absolutely no way we can release that. Otherwise, this podcast is never going to be listened to again. So you have to be very careful because
you're all secretly not very nice. But you just hide that on your show.
Horrendously awful.
Whereas we're nice. We don't, honestly, I can't think of an instance. I mean, I'm sure if I was given a bit of time to do so, I could come up with one. But I can't think of an instance now where it's been like that. What were we thinking? That is awful. The C word comes out. You've got bleeps on your show, by the way.
We only bleep the C word.
Yeah. So the C word we wouldn't leave that in with a bleep. We would somehow tidy it up. Mostly, actually, it's when we talk about our own real lives. That's what comes out.
Yeah, which is fair. At the end of the day, line between art and artist, and you don't want to necessarily have that sort of stuff out there, or it might be things that is sensitive out there.
Did you just say art and artist?
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to you guys. You guys are...
man. Oh, yeah, our art, yeah. It's just this chaotic group of slightly old men playing Dungeons and Dragons. Anyway,
art, exactly.
It makes me laugh. It is art. What it actually is a new kind of thing. Seriously now, okay? So this is interesting. Well, I mean, all sorts of things are interesting. What is it, right? Because it's not art. It's not art in the conventional sense, anyway. I mean, in any of the media that one would eventually, you kind of discuss art being created in, it's sort of more like Test Match Special, which is where one of our when we Paul and I were on an airplane talking about whether or not to make a podcast because we were both listening to the Glass Cannon, and we thought, I wonder if we could make something like this. Turns out we couldn't. I
listen. I've done the Spotify check. You're very much in the same conversation,
just below them. So it turns out we couldn't do that, but it's still fun to do. And we thought, what are our touchstone things? Like, what are we thinking about what's the tone going to be like? And we had a set of rules. One of which was like Test Match Special, right? So Test Match Special, they try and be as rude as they can possibly be, but still be allowed to be broadcast at 3:00 on a Saturday afternoon. So that's one of our things. The other one is with Test Match Special it's just old people sitting and talking about something that other people can't see or understand. And if that isn't a summary of how real actual play podcasting works, I can't think of a better one. The other rule was that anybody who listened to it, if anybody ever did listen to it, would feel like they were sitting at the corner of a table where people were playing I mean, this is not rocket science, is it? They would feel like they were sitting at the corner of a table where people were playing D&D and just not able to participate themselves, but like they were just sitting there. Maybe they were nodding off a bit and had their eyes closed and they had it. We have a player called Nick who's not part of the podcast, but he's a member of the Hilltop, the Billowing Hilltop. Which, by the way, predates the podcast. It's a name of a chat room that we originally had back in the day, an email group. That he falls asleep within 5 minutes of every session starting, and he sleeps all the way through. And you wake him up at the end so that he can go home. And part of our thinking was, imagine you're Nick. You're not fully asleep, right? Because every now and again he does that. Like, have I some words with the sports events? He does those, margarine, maybe on Wednesday. He does those little things where he's clearly like surfing the little divining line between consciousness and sleep. So what's his experience like? And it's like it's sitting there and hearing D&D being played and sort of feeling a part of it, but not feeling like they need to contribute. Otherwise, he'd stay awake. And that is kind of where we headed. which is why we put the dice in. We had a discussion earlier on about dice and technology and stuff. We used to copy and paste pretend dice into the recordings so that it sounded like. And the only other sound effects we put in, mostly, apart from some ambient stuff to set the atmosphere for the adventure, is the sound of maps being unfolded and people writing stuff down. If I say, has anybody got a paper and pen? I'll give you the list. Then we put a pretend sound, because what we're trying to do is like this Foley stuff is to try and give people the impression that they're sitting at an actual table with people sitting around a table.
And it works. And we've talked about doing similar. I think we've mainly talked about music, whether to put music in, because we don't have music in our episodes at all. And we talked about whether there was any need for it, any benefit for it, and we sort of, it was a bit of a 50-50 vote.
You've got Stuart.
Well, yeah, we got the beginning, but as ambience.
Stuart is genius.
Oh, come on! Listen, we can't give Stuart any credit.
He makes me laugh because he's so grumpy, and the music. I mean, the bardcore stuff is just hilarious. I've been listening to yours quite a lot recently, and it's like they don't have music, they don't have effects, they don't have dice, and it's why do we do all of that stuff? Because it's just the same. All of the stuff that we spend ages doing, it makes absolutely no difference, because you listen to Dice and Desire, they don't have any of that stuff. It's just, I'm just listening to it. That's what's important, right? Is the game, the characters, the people chatting away, and all of the other stuff is bollocks, it turns out. But we can't stop now because we spend too much time doing it. So.
But it's ambiance, isn't it? You say it's bollocks, but it's setting that scene. It's making people feel more like they're at the table. It makes it feel like you guys are actually together, even though you're not. Like I genuinely, I would say, listening to your show more than most of the other shows that I've listened to over the last year, definitely feels like you're in a room, even though you're not. So obviously you can hear people.
Yeah,
you can listen to some podcasts, and they're definitely in a room because they're chaotically talking over each other, and there's moments where they're away from the microphone. Like there's moments like that. But people that are joining a game digitally, you can usually tell they're joining digitally and they're calling from wherever they are in the country. I would say your show, like I say, it definitely feels like you're together. So the fact that you're not actually, it sort of surprised me that you're not.
So that is where we put a lot of our effort is into giving that. I was going to use the word experience there, and then I realised that that's just bollocks. We'd like the impression that we are sitting face to face is something that's important to us, because that was what we were going for at the beginning. Like I said, we honestly stumbled into this. It was like, if we start recording it, can we make it interesting? If we were going to apply any effort or intelligence or anything, I mean, not intelligence in my case, but maybe Paul's case, to the whole process, why are we going to apply that effort? What are we going to try and do with it? And the answer was, we'll try and make it sound like it's real, like you're sitting at the corner of a table. Because the early actual plays that I listened to years and years and years ago was the phone in the middle of the table thing, where people, you can hear the sound of the fridge door opening and closing and the dog barking downstairs, and people just sort of chatted about work, and then every now and again they rolled the dice, but it's weirdly hypnotic, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought, well, we want that feel like you're actually playing around a table, even though we know that we're not going to have it. And we kind of got there. Then the other thing that we've didn't plan to do, but we've ended up doing, which I think mixed success, so I think it depends on the taste of the person, is that there's like Clash of the Titans, where the gods all sit around and look at the people on the table, and you jump between the gods and the table. We then put in ambience around the characters as they are experiencing the environments in the adventure. Nothing that you couldn't play in the background while you're playing at a table. That is our rule, right? So nothing that you couldn't do while you were playing. So like a particular piece of music or a general ambient kind of sound. And that is weird, because then that effectively breaks our own first rule. I don't know if it works. Then what we started doing is, in our intros, we started touring the sets. Which means that you've completely let slip the moorings of reality and just drifted off into somewhere that you were intending to do.
Exactly.
We do bits on the set of the show where where we're talking as if we're on I don't know. It doesn't make any sense.
The broom cupboard.
Well, there's also the broom cupboard. The broom cupboard is actually a real Discord room, but that was because we recorded an episode where nobody. You've played D&D where you've got to take somebody off into the kitchen and have a quick secret chat with them about this or that, and it was an episode where there was a lot of that, and we had to work out how to do it.
Yeah, I listened to that episode very recently. We're drifting into your show a little bit too much. I want to focus on that in a little minute, and I will come back to that in a second. I want to just carry on with the podcasting side of life and the technicalities of doing things. So one of the reasons we didn't end up putting in any Foley work was because two reasons. One, we took the view, and please don't take this as an insult because the fact you do it. We took the view of if we're not doing a good enough job telling the story without the additional, then that we need to think about how we do it. So we thought if that's necessary, then we're obviously not doing a very good job. But equally, I've heard too many shows where it becomes intrusive. Now with yours, I would say yours is done so well. I probably didn't even notice that it was there. Despite what I just said about you guys feeling like you're in a room, it was so well done that it's there, but it's not like it's so in your face and I can feel it. But now thinking about it, I can remember that you've got the dice rolls and the scrolls in particular. I'm like, oh yeah, I've definitely heard them opening up a scroll or something like that.
The maps being unfolded. Sorry,
But I've had other shows where I'm listening along and they'll cast a spell and suddenly they'll put in some sound effects of the spell and I'm like, okay, this is a bit much. This has just come out because it's more to do with sound balancing than anything. It's more to do with suddenly this is what the spell, the sound effect is way louder. I think if you're going to do that, you need to have it just in the background. It needs to be as if someone's describing to you, which is I guess what D&D is. It needs to be as if it's as if they're watching a show in the background and their audio describing to you what's on the TV. So that's what you should hear, not I hear the TV and then you talking over it.
Yes, that's a very good way. That's a very good way of putting it. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, so we were just a bit worried about putting it in, it becoming distracting, it becoming something that we meant extra effort and all that sort of stuff. Because we're all into we want an easy life. We don't want to have to spend extra time for.
It's a shitload of work. That's the thing. But then Lucas, one of our players, built the magic dice machine that plays dice into the recording. That's a big thing.
Amazing.
After that, it's like a map unfolding every now and again, then the occasional bits and bobs. But you're right when you say that. I mean, it is intentional that you wouldn't know unless you were told that it wasn't. I mean, I don't know whether or not people would think, "Oh, this is real. I'm listening to a real room," but they certainly shouldn't get the impression that stuff is being added in to make it sound that way. That was our dividing line. We do have discussions. There's a guy called Johnny who plays in our game who constantly complains that somebody cast a fireball and there wasn't like a rumble or a sound of a fireball going off, or somebody dropped a teaspoon and there wasn't the sound of whatever. And we don't do that because maybe occasionally we break that rule, but mostly incidental sounds are not dealt with. The only times we do them is when we feel that something that's quite a complex piece of description, like theatre of the mind, like you're doing a complicated room with a mechanism and a thing and a puzzle and whatever, that if you want to put a sound in to make it clearer to the listener, that what it is that you're following, right? Because often this stuff is implied. People are talking about it, but they're not describing it. And the DM can be like, well, you've got this. So very early on, there is a kind of sarcophagus on a rotunda that you can turn. And I listened to the first cut of that episode, and it's like, this is massively confusing. And then Paul went in and did a thing where there was a kind of scrapey, stony rumbling noise when they were turning it, and it just transformed it. It was like, aha, so there it's worth doing. Most of the time it's not worth doing. Not fireballs, not magic missiles, not spooky laughter, doors creaking open. We won't do any of that, right? But every now and again, the environment that the adventurers are exploring can be communicated much more effectively and quickly by a tiny little bit of intervention, like a little sound or this or that. And that's what we do.
Yeah.
There we are.
Yeah, but it's how do you know when that time is? I guess it's
absolutely no idea. No, most of the time we get it wrong.
there might be there might be times
absolutely
where you
no idea. No,
you might have had times where you haven't put it in and it would have. So
Yeah, 100%, yeah. And we'd also become lazier as we got on. I don't know if this was the same with you, but the first sort of 5-10 episodes, you're like, this is this great, wonderful new journey. And, once you get to about 30, 40 in, you're like, oh, fuck it.
I assume not, but have you or any of your group done like podcasting before or anything like that?
No.
Is this the first
Absolutely
time
nothing. No, we had no idea what we were doing. Well, as is clear to anybody who listens to the first few shows, absolutely no idea what we were doing. We were recording through whatever microphones, like Apple earbuds, and like microphones that you clip onto your shirt collar.
Yeah.
And a mixture of stuff, and you can hear it. And then what we discovered is that there was I'm on a cheap Sennheiser headset now. They're about 15 quid each. And I did a Google of like best cheap podcasting headsets. And it was like, hey, if you don't want to spend, those kind of things. Hey, if you're on a budget, but you don't want to blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Sennheiser, I thought, fuck it, I'll order one. Transformed the audio quality on the first one we recorded with me using it, and then me and Paul just bought them for everybody else for their birthday and Christmas. So because that didn't happen at one go, over like shows, I have to admit I'm searching back in my memory now because it seems a very long time ago, but I think from like episode 3 or 4 or something up till about episode 10, each person improves a little bit because each person got a new headset. And by episode like 9 or 10, everybody's sounding good. And then episode 26, that I do know, is when we started using Zen. And then you can really hear it. Zen is like studio quality before it's like polished up online chat quality.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing how much the difference a microphone can make. So
man.
So me, Stuart and MJ, Stuart, MJ and I, to say it grammatically correct, we prior to this, and actually overlapping for a few months, we had another podcast that we've been doing for 4 years, and we started out very much just like, hey, what about if we tried to do this thing? We started it, and then realised, I don't know how long it took longer than it probably should. But I was like, yeah, I'm not sure my microphone's good. I think it was I think I actually was using this microphone here that I'm not using now, but I was using this originally to podcast with.
And
it was just very. It was just
like
very
a gamey headset thing, yeah.
And it was very muffled, very whatever. And I then, after a few months, whatever, upgraded to this Snowball, and it just from an audio quality point of view, just the show just was so much better. And I think the other guys also upgraded their microphones as well. And it, if you are gonna do it, like, none of us have the budget to go out there and buy the absolute best thing out there. We're not gonna get some proper studio quality thing. But if you are going to podcast, it's worth having that bit of investment from the outset to make sure that what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, where were you when we started? Yeah. Thanks, Nate. That's great. Yeah. Thanks, man. That's great. Thanks for telling us that. Yeah. Useful. It's only 2 years too late, but thank you. These things are good though. These Sennheiser it's easy for me to say. Sennheiser PC8 telephony headset. And of course, it's not as good as a proper whatever. But again, the old rule of we don't adjust what we do because it's a podcast meant that headsets were a must because the covenant, it's too grand a word maybe, that we had, Paul and I, who were doing the kind of work in the background with the others, was we're just going to play online like we normally do. We'll send you a headset to wear when you play, and you'll have a link that you have to click on before we start. But otherwise, you won't have to worry. You won't have a big microphone that you have to pull down. You don't have to worry about audio quality. You won't have to, and none of that stuff. Yeah. And so that's why the headset is there. I don't think it would fly if I tried to get the others to buy expensive. Paul bought an expensive microphone, by the way, about a month in, right? He was like, Paul's a bit of a kit freak, so he was like, oh yes, I'm going to sing absolute shite. I mean, just dreadful. It sounded like he was talking down. When people talk to you down like the inside of a roll of like Christmas wrapping paper in order to freak you out. Yeah, that kind of sound. Dreadful. And then Lucas bought a posh microphone, and that posh microphone just clicks all the time. Like there's some weird interference on it. So we finally managed to convince everybody use the basic ones. And that's the benefit of that, of course, for mixing is that everybody's on the same mic. Everybody's plugged into the same system. It's all be recording in the same way. The auto processing is then chewing through audio that's all set at a straight benchmark, as it were. and it just makes life a lot easier. And the audio that comes out, the untouched audio that comes out of Zen, is pretty much broadcast quality straight away.
I have to say, like, so you've been podcasting for 2 years, yeah?
We started recording. Yeah, we've been Yeah, we have. We released our first episode in November 2019, but we started recording the summer before. So yeah, 2 years we've been recording. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like everything. It's remarkable the knowledge you can pick up quickly enough.
Yeah.
Like the way you're talking about all this. Yeah, you've obviously been through some trial and errors, and you've obviously learned what works and what doesn't work for you, and it's very, very impressive. Like we've tried it, but I'm not as much as I enjoy tech and stuff. I'm not actually that great at the real technical side of it. So
right,
I'll just do whatever the other guys like. Stuart's a musician. He knows what he's doing when it comes to editing. He knows what he's doing when it comes to audio. So he's if he says something's better, then I'll try and do it. I don't know the whys and the what fors. I'll just
the whys and the what fors. I mean, there's that famous phrase. Oh, I've said phrase saying.
Yeah, that same as fraying.
Cut that out. You fucking cut that out. Wouldn't
have thought so.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I now know. It's like that I know kung fu bit from The Matrix. I now know, although not obviously it wasn't all kind of learnt within like 30 seconds, but I now know this, so that I could now do that embarrassing article that I contributed to when we first started. I could now do one that was actually useful for people, right? I don't know that I would be able to tell them how to market it or how to support it or how to do any of the other stuff, right? But in terms of the technology of physically just getting people round an online gaming session, recording it, and then making it sound like it's done in person and have good sound quality, and also the editing is absolutely everything. We get about 50% of what we record hits the streets, Nate. Which I think
that's a nice
I'm not
phrase.
Sure that would have been. Yeah, I don't think that's no. But you know what I mean. Only about 50% of what we record actually gets released.
Yeah. Wow.
And the idea, well, because the point being that we don't want something. There is the artifice. It sounds like we're playing naturally. That's where that's the bit I find interesting. So forget all that technology bit which we've been talking about, which I am interested in. But what is interesting about making the show, if you can call it that, is the other bit, which is how do you make something sound like you've got a group of people playing D&D in a room together, and it doesn't sound like you're editing it or there's any artifice in it. It sounds like it's a naturally recorded organic thing, and yet it is not, because you're only listening to half of what went on. That is what interests me. And what we have learned is the art of doing that. If there's anything that we've learned that's actually useful, but completely impossible to communicate to anybody else. So what's the point? Is how do you turn real D&D into not real D&D that sounds like real D&D?
That, because again, that's impressive, because I wouldn't have thought so. I wouldn't have thought that was relatively heavily edited. I've listened to
very heavily edited.
I've listened to heavily edited podcasts. I can't think of any realistically from a D&D perspective, but I remember a few years ago someone said to me, recommended a movie podcast, and I listened to it, and man, you could tell it was scripted and it was heavily edited, because like every there was no ums and ers, and that, which is fine. You can get away with that easy enough, but it just, the way the conversation flowed was they were bouncing off each other so well, and you sort of think, how on earth?
Yeah. How's that done? Yeah.
How are you making the right points for each other to bounce off of? And it just, to me, I hated it. I much prefer a podcast style which is normal human beings conversing. So yours, if yours is truly as edited as you say it is, and that's pretty impressive.
I think. Yeah, but I think we should be careful about what we mean by editing. So what we don't create pretend stuff. We just chop out. Well, there's something called truncate silence in Audacity, which your friend Luke will know all about, which is a magic processing thing, which just cuts every big gap down to nothing. The secret to having it sound like people are in person is to remove the online call lag, right? That little gap that you get when people are not especially when they can't see video. So that makes a massive difference. And then what we do is we cut out a lot of the, so you're DMing, right? Whenever you DM and you're describing a room or you're describing a situation, I know we're straying into DMing, but we won't stay there. You probably take more than one go at it, don't you? You outline what the players can see or what they experience, what the characters can experience. And then it's like in the back of your head, you're like, maybe I didn't quite nail that. Maybe it should be clearer if I was to say that actually what it is that the goblin is not hiding behind the chest. He's just standing so far behind the chest and he's short that he's kind of obscured from you, right? So you might go in, if you were trying to turn a 2.5 hour role-playing session into a 1 hour program, and go, well, that first time that Mike described where the goblin was and what was happening, and the second time, let's just keep the second time. So we don't create new stuff.
No,
through the editing process. We just abbreviate, and then we very carefully leave in some ums and ers, Nate. I thought that would annoy you. Isn't that annoying?
I don't know. I like an and er.
I think that's annoying. So, don't tidy it up too much because it doesn't sound natural. There you go. That's it. So it's not. I think I gave the wrong impression, which is that the thing is a piece of confection. It's not at all. It's just a chopped down thing where we cut out the rubbish. We do chop out some ums and ers. I do a lot of. Let me have a look. I mean, I scroll through PDFs. Right? We could make a whole other program of me. Mike scrolls through PDFs, the podcast, which would be me going, yeah, hold up, hold up, it's taking a bit of time to load. Wait a second, here we go. 1 second, hold up, sorry about this. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, it's 15 foot long and 10 foot wide, and there's a door at the end of the corridor, and we get rid of all of that.
You'll be so incredibly
you do the same
pleased.
Thing.
But I was going to say, you're going to be so incredibly pleased to know that Mike scrolls through PDFs. There's no podcast on Spotify for that at the moment. So that is
okay. Well,
that is well and truly you're going to be number one on that.
Do you think we could better our position on Spotify than we have for Paizo by being top? I don't know. I don't think if we put Adobe in there, we're going to get anywhere. Anyway, yeah, Mike scrolls through PDFs. I tell you what we want to do is we do want to do what we would quite like to do, talking about podcasting, is something a bit different. I don't mean different as in a completely different kind of podcast. I mean as in a different kind of adventure. We are running again, we aren't going to talk about this in any detail because we get into DMing in a bit, but we're playing a very, very long adventure that we're recording.
Yeah.
Every now and again, I think, wouldn't it be, yes, of course, yes, you are Storm King's Thunder, which is just a huge, great thing. Wouldn't it be fun to do something different just for a couple of weeks? Mm-hmm. We played some Alien RPG recently. We all got together for the first time in years. We play about twice a year. We all get together and we rent a house somewhere and just play D&D for a couple of days, get it out of our system. We played some Alien RPG. Oh, absolutely loved it. I mean, it's just playing something different atmosphere, different mechanics, different whole thing. The whole approach is different, right? And I sat there thinking, we should record this it's only 2-3 sessions. It wouldn't be a whole other thing. It would just be like a little, not a one shot, but like a little mini show. And I do sometimes think, let's do something different. I don't know why that thought occurred to me to tell you about that now, but that's my current thing, because you do get into a bit of a rut when you're doing the same thing over and over.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why part of the reason I wanted this show, I guess, is because, like I say, I've got a bit of a podcasting background, and as much as I love D&D, it's nice to have something a bit different. It's nice to have something that's just chatty.
What was the other podcast about?
Food. It was called Fruck Unwrapped. So my friend MJ, I'm saying my friend like no one would know who he is. MJ, who plays Quinch on the show. He's funny. Yeah. Don't say that. Please don't give him any.
No, but he is funny. He
compliments.
Is funny. Yeah.
Oh, don't say that, please. Right. What time's this? I need to edit this bit out. He, a few years ago, he set up a YouTube channel called Food Review UK, and basically it is what it says on the tin. He basically would pick up snacks and food and whatever, and he'd review it, do 5-minute videos talking about how good they, bad, or they were. And I joined in that. We do it on YouTube anyway. At one point, someone said to us, "Why don't you do a podcast?" And we were like, "Yeah, we fancy doing a podcast. Actually, why not?" So that's where Stuart, MJ, and I collaborated and started a podcast called Fruck Unwrapped.
Right.
And for 4 years, we did a 2-weekly, a fortnightly. That's the word I'm looking for. A fortnightly show about food, a very irreverent, as you can imagine from what the style of D&D we are, very irreverent look at food. And it was a fantastic journey, and we absolutely loved from beginning to end the process. The whole lot. I'm throwing in all the cliches. But we got to a point where we felt like we were maybe repeating ourselves a little bit. We were saying the same things over and over again. There's only so many times you can tell the same stories. Food itself doesn't necessarily update dramatically, because the way the show was
if it did, Nate, I mean, life would be chaos, right? I mean, if food updated dramatically, like week to week, so that you'd wake up in the morning and you'd be like, everything's changed. I don't know what. Life would become unlivable, to be honest.
Exactly. So once you've talked about burgers and you've done a whole episode about what your favourite burger is and what you like in burgers, you can't really go back and talk about it again without repeating. So that's where we got to the point where it was just like, I don't feel like I'm saying anything new, particularly interesting at the moment. Maybe it's time we bring it to an end. And that was great. And that sort of coincided with getting into D&D. And it was like, well, actually, I'm really loving Dungeons and Dragons at the moment. So this is feeling a bit tired and dated. We're now enjoying doing Dice and Desire. Maybe we just put that to one side and we get and start this and enjoy this new project.
Yeah, but you knew how to record a podcast before you started recording the D&D thing, which is just a massive advantage. Whereas I don't know if anybody who'll stumble across this program will and then bothers to listen to our thing will notice early on we really didn't know what we were doing in the first few. It is a bit of a mess.
We were also fortunate enough that we had a mini built-in audience as well, because people who are fans of the previous podcast and the Food Review UK YouTube, we obviously, not all of them by any means, but a select few decided to give this a go. And, so that gave us at least a little bit of a starting group.
Gotcha.
We've been fortunate since then. Right, we've skirted around it.
So you have, are you saying that you have an audience for your podcast, that people actually listen to it? Because we don't have anybody. We do. Honestly, well, that's fantastic to hear.
I feel like you're being very modest.
No, really not. I mean, we are now find it a bit weird that we actually have, as it were, digital evidence that people are listening to us. Early on, it was like, I think, honestly, there were conversations early on which like, I think somebody listened to the show the other day. I'm pretty certain that we've got somebody listening.
No way.
No, I'm not no, I'm honestly not exaggerating. We were getting like we get stats. We're with Blueberry are our hosts. We get like the free stats package. You're obviously not going to pay for anything, right? And it doesn't tell you very much. It just tells you downloads. There would be early on, we got a whole bunch of downloads when we first launched the show because we told our mates, we're doing this thing, blah, blah, blah. So you get a few. And then it just absolute Gobi Desert, nothing. And then eventually one day it was like, I mean, honestly, you would get 1 or 2 downloads a day and you'd look at the location. And it was like, oh, that's Graham. He's on the show. That's Haringey. Or Dan is in Haringey, right? Or Lucas is in Switzerland. Oh, that's Lucas. You'd be like, oh, fuck it. I remember you said once.
I was just about to reference this.
Yeah, when we were talking, you said, oh, you'd listen to my show. And I went onto the stats and it's like, yeah, there he is. Because it's like, honestly, we have so few people. It's like the one listener that day. It's like, well, that's Nate then. Nowadays, I have to say, we have been pleasantly surprised recently. The numbers are very different and we're doing better. But we still would say we set up... hold on, I'm not articulating that very well. Our little goal, our little bar we set for ourselves, the phrase we used was church hall. Could we get a church hall of people listening to us? And we think that is kind of roughly where we are. I mean, more of a church basement support group, perhaps. 10 people on kitchen chairs sitting in a circle. Every now and again, we get like somebody actually says something on Twitter or something about how they liked it or they like this thing or they're like, God, people are actually listening to this, which I find completely bewildering. Anyway, I derailed you.
No, well, you did, but in a loving way that moves us onto what I'm going to do. I mean, we've talked about, we've skirted around D&D. I didn't know how to start. I don't know if you've listened to the DM and DMer show before. I like to try and start with trying to find out the person and a bit about their their real life, I guess. And with you, I remember early on you said, "There's nothing interesting about me. I've got no passions in life," or
Did I
something
say
similar. You
that?
basically
I
something
don't
along
think I
those
said
lines.
that,
You said
did I?
there's not. Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
My life is a shell. Yeah.
And obviously we went into podcasting, and that's something that you and I have had many conversations about before anyway. So it's very fitting and very natural. So it's nice to talk about that sort of technical
Mm-hmm.
side of things. But we have skirted around. I mean, oh God, he hits the microphone and ruins everything.
See, this is the thing with you and your expensive microphone. Yeah. You want one of these headsets, mate? 15 quid, mate.
Originally, this microphone was on a stand on the table, and basically I was getting complaints about when I'd roll the dice, it would be near the microphone. They'd be able to hear the dice thudding against the desk and stuff like that. So I bought this to avoid that. And now what happens is I just hit the microphone stand.
Why wouldn't you want the sound of the dice? Like, you want the sound of the dice. They've got to be in there.
It's more thuddy than rolly, if that makes sense. It's more not the satisfying clickety clackety of them. It was more
early
just
on.
Thud.
I took the headphones that I had at the time, which had a microphone built in, like Bluetooth ones, which is what we were using to do the recording, and I switched them on and I laid them down on my kitchen table, and I rolled dice towards them on various surfaces, honestly, for about 2 hours, and then listened back to the right ones early on just to get that sound. So that is how sad I am.
Amazing.
And there I said, I'm a man without passions. Hey?
Exactly. Sounds, rolling dice are your passions. Which
I do find it fascinating, the stuff. But the dice, it's not a technical point. This is a D&D thing, by the way, so don't worry. I'm not going to go too podcasty technically. Dice are the center of the D&D universe, right? Not just in terms of people posting pictures of, frankly, what look like relatively shit dice they've made themselves, but also, you know what I mean. But also pictures, dice porn, all that. Fine, I like dice. I like to buy a set of dice. I have the blue. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, we're not miles off. You have the blue dice of power. This is the dice that I live with. That's
Lovely.
the dice that makes the saves. Dice are critical. They are the decisions of fate. They are the mechanics of the universe which you describe. So if you're making a podcast, what I noticed in the glass cannon, which is, I mean, I think we should, well, you may not agree, but I certainly think is the best D&D actual play podcast. I know. Don't die.
It's not D&D though, is it? So
no, we'll get into that in a moment. It's Pathfinder, which is D&D, or rather, anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
They clearly made a conscious decision to center to, I'm going to use a really annoying word now, and I'm using it deliberately annoyingly, to foreground the dice in their experience because they are so critical. And when they play, they jump around and they're much more excited and animated about the whole thing than we are and you guys are. But they make, well, we are, but they whoop and they jump about like a kind of an American golf crowd, right? So they and they really go for it, and that works, and it's all part of the the general sense of the show. But the dice are absolutely critical. They talk about the dice, they fetishize the dice, they talk about their dice rolls, they bait their breaths as the dice roll across the table. It's critical, and they were right to make that decision because the dice are the decisions of fate in the story. So you've got to include them, which is why I spent 2 hours rolling dice across various surfaces on my kitchen table towards a microphone when we first started, because you have to, well, you and I will obviously not agree on this, but I thought it was a foundational truth that we had to have, if we were playing online and we were trying to create an impression that we were playing face to face, that we had to have pretend dice.
I never said I disagreed. I just said we just didn't agree. I don't know if that's the same thing.
No,
but
well, I mean, we just,
for us, it was just for us. It's if it's done right, it's great.
Yeah.
But it's just I'm going to have a little bit of a palate cleanser. So I was sort of very briefly touching on there before, because I didn't know how to start tonight's conversation or what we were going to talk about.
Yeah.
I just came up with some random things about various things that we've been talking about lately.
Mm.
And indeed, a question. For some reason, I threw in there for no reason, because I saw something on the internet just before I came on. I'm going to ask you, Beano or Dandy?
Oh, now that's a very good question. Beano, I think, but my dad was a big fan of the Dandy. He was a big fan of Desperate Dan and his cow pie, which was Dandy. Yes.
Yep.
Minnie the Mink, was Minnie the Mink's Dandy?
Oh no, I think she was.
Or was Minnie the Mink's Beano?
Wasn't? Oh, maybe. That's a good
Anyway,
question.
I think I was Beano. Dennis the Menace, Roger the Dodger, Bash Street Kids. Yeah, the Beano. And then later on, Crazy and Cheeky. Did you ever get Whizzer and Chips? See, the problem with you is you're too young. So Whizzer and then Chips. There was Crazy Comic. There was a little DNA thread of comics that were a spur off the Beano Dandy idea in the kind of late 70s, early 80s. They kind of raised the production values a little bit. They got like a slightly bigger format, more color. They had to go for it. Some of them were successful, some of them not so successful.
To give you some context from that, an American friend of mine posted a picture about how they were enjoying watching an old classic Dennis the Menace film, which was the 93 version, which involved Walter Matthau and some random kid.
You're not going to draw me into some cultural thing here. I don't get annoyed by that kind of stuff.
Oh, I wasn't annoyed by it.
No, I do get a little bit narked by some appropriation stuff. Maybe I think some people think that that's kind of super kind of snowflakey or whatever. I think there's been quite a lot of cultural appropriation. But in terms of things like, for example, the UK or the American Office, or, all of that stuff, it doesn't bother me. I don't know why. It just doesn't bother me. There you go. Anyway, Beano is the answer to that question. But 2000 AD is the real answer to your question.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I mean, actually, I thought the real answer would be Viz to me, but there you go.
No. Well, I was too. Viz is different, but when I was a kid, I was obsessed with 2000 AD.
Judge Dredd?
Yeah, Judge Dredd. I have somewhere or had an issue 3 of 2000 AD, which is the first one I think to feature Judge Dredd.
That would be worth some money, I would imagine.
Well, the guy I mentioned who always falls asleep at D&D, Nick, I gave him all my old 2000 ADs years ago, and God knows what he did with them. I know.
That's a painful story. That is a painful story. Any musical performance background?
Well, weirdly, Dan, who's on our show, is a music engineer. We used to do music when I first got out of education and started working. Dan and I both tried our hands at musicianship and recording music. And we both sort of know, especially Dan, know our way around a little bit around a studio. And we would record where we recorded songs, and we were kind of in little bands. It never really went anywhere. We did some stuff with some people who, in the end, I don't think that Dan and I were really into it as much as we needed to be. I think you need to be very ambitious and kind of geared towards it to really properly do it. Mm-hmm. And I think we were more interested in the music than in anything else. But some of the people we work with did, tolerably well. I'm talking about who they are. And so yes, and I can play the guitar relatively well, and I can play the piano or keyboards or whatever pretty well.
I'm sensing a theme here, because you are now the fifth guest in a row that has some form of background in the performance arts, albeit maybe not.
Yeah, I think background might be putting it a bit strongly. Yeah, I was doing other things, and it was something we would go to. There was a studio that Dan set up the engineering for in Islington in the very late 80s, early 90s. And we would both leave work and go down there and then record music until 4 or 5 in the morning, and then go home and then get up and go to work. And we would do that an awful lot.
Right. I mean, the fact that you can play 2 instruments is enough for me. I can't even play the triangle. So the fact that you can do those 2 things that's enough. it's. I'm going to throw it in the pot.
Well, there's music in the show. There's music in the show, right? So in our podcast, we have weird songs that we kind of dip in every now and again. Yeah. Stuart is a much more interesting, creative kind of person, and you're looking really annoyed already. Why am I not allowed to praise the people on your show? I think Stuart's really interesting because I think basically he makes you laugh, but it's also there's something to it. There's more to it than just making you laugh. And I like his little summary, little kind of catch-up songs. Right. Well, we don't do anything quite so kind of structured and quite so interesting as what Stuart is doing, but we do put music into the podcast. There's a Hesty Testapod song and other bits and bobs, and that comes from the fact that both Dan and I can, do a bit.
Stuart's very briefly on that. Stuart's a very, very talented guy, very good at his music, and when we were starting the podcast, we basically said we wanted a recap of some sorts because certainly the ones I'd listened to had something, and just out of nowhere I went, oh, we've got a bard on the show. What about if the bard did some songs at the whatever? And I still remember when, even though I know how talented he is and how good he can be, when I first heard the first song that he did on episode 2 for us, I was just blown away, and I had goosebumps, and I was like, that's unreal. That's better than the rest of our show. We don't deserve this.
This is going to be the longest show ever because we're back to podcasting again now, and I'm sure we've got more to talk about. But yes, isn't it fantastic when you're doing this, bearing in mind that nobody pays you to do it, when you hit those little bits when you're putting something together, and it could be, like you said, like Stuart's recap tunes, and they are fantastic, or we'll every now and again, at our end, we'll hit something that we like, and you just think, okay, this is a laugh. This is good, and it kind of makes you kind of it's a really rewarding, positive thing to do. I don't know how many people will listen to this. Probably 80 times as many people who listen to our show. If you're sitting out there thinking, how is it done? Why do so many people make podcasts? One of the reasons might be that actually the practice of creating the things as a sort of, in a bit like Daniel Bedingfield.
I never expected Daniel Bedingfield to come out tonight.
So Daniel Bedingfield, who was somebody I'm not particularly interested in, but he was marketed, even though this was not true, as like the bedroom pop star, right? Was the idea, oh, it's amazing. He just records the whole thing in his bedroom, and the whole thing's just amazing. He just does it with a sequencer. So it's like that idea, though, that music was democratized and broadcasting has been democratized with podcasts. And there is, in fact, an inherent reward, kind of fulfillment in actually making the stuff, even if nobody's listening to it, which is lucky, frankly, because nobody is.
Who is this Daniel Bedingfield that you speak of? I
yes, have to. For the record, can somebody please write down his Daniel Bedingfield? Thank you very much.
But no, I totally agree. I'm. Would I like to be famous? Would I like to be adored by scores of fans? Of course, I would.
Would you?
Really, yeah, sort of. But that's for another podcast. But
we need to talk about Operation Weatherspoons, but we'll do it in a minute.
But ultimately, I podcast because I enjoy it. I podcast because there's a sense of creation, like you said there. It's a sense of production. And I've had this conversation with a friend of mine wants to get into podcasting. He's never done it. He's featured on the one that I was talking about earlier, the Fruck one. But he's never done his own one, and he wants to get into it. And he's very much in his own head. He's like, I have to do something creative. I have to do something unique. It has to find a spot in the market that no one else has ever done. Because I think that he thinks that to podcasts, I think he wants to do a podcast for it to be a big thing that blows up.
Yeah, no point in doing it unless it actually gets traction. Whereas actually there is a point in doing it. Yeah, I 100%
There's
agree.
Pride, there's creativity, there's artistic struggle. There's all these things that go into it.
But you don't want to be famous for doing it. We, like I said, honestly and genuinely, we just, for our piece of rubbish that we produce, it was, let's play D&D and record it. And if we get a church hall of people listening to it, then that will do us. And now we have what's called Operation Weatherspoons, which I just mentioned, which is that we've managed to finally tease out of one of our players an ambition around fame, because none of us have any. And it is. This is absolutely this is straight down the line. And by the way, I'm not going to get into the whys and wherefores of Weatherspoons as an organisation, but Johnny, who currently is running the character Bugraft on our program, his ambition is that one day he will be standing at the bar of a Weatherspoons, I presume, proximate nearby a games convention. And he will be talking to somebody, or he will be ordering a drink, and somebody will recognize his voice, and they will say, "Wait a moment, aren't you Johnny from the Billowing Hilltop podcast? Let me buy you a drink." Right now,
Amazing.
It's so divorced from reality. It's a very Johnny thing, but on the other hand, there is a certain kind of. I did sit there and just kind of look off into the middle distance a bit and thought, now there is an ambition that we should be after. We should try and get sufficient listenership, right? Readership, as we call them, so that, and one day go, I don't know, to UK Games Expo or Dragon Bastard, whatever it's called, and whether can we get somebody to buy Johnny a free pint as a result of this show? And if we have, the show has achieved everything that it set out to do. So there we go. That's it.
It's right. Humble brag. I have actually been recognised in public twice for my Food Review UK stuff, and
never. That's extraordinary.
And it is remarkably confusing and overwhelming. The first time it happened, literally, I mean, and I'm talking like literally somebody in the street walks up and goes, "Excuse me, are you Nathan from Food Review UK?" And it's like, yeah, I am.
That's very cool.
Very, very, very weird. Very, very weird feeling. So I do truly hope that happens, and you all get drinks, lots and lots of drinks.
Tell me that wasn't fun.
What, the story? Amazing fun.
I mean, yeah, it was fun. Yeah, okay. I think we would do a live thing. By the way, I think we would, if we could get ourselves together. I don't know how well it would work. The logistics, the kind of the practicalities of doing a live thing are very difficult. I mean, irrespective of the technology and sitting around a table and doing something live anyway, it's like, what do you do? I don't know how far in advance you record, but we couldn't sit down next week and do a live thing recording an episode, because everybody who came along would be 4 months behind. So I don't know how you do it. Glass Cannon record a separate adventure, but then they're doing a separate thing that they do as a completely separate strand, and they've been doing a series of live shows because they're huge, and they could start a whole other strand just for the live shows. But obviously we wouldn't do that. We would just do it as a one-off bit of fun sometimes to try and get Johnny the Pint and Weatherspoons.
Exactly. You just have to do it as a one shot, I guess. And that is one of our dreams is to do a live show one day. Maybe there's something here. Maybe we can join up and do a live show con.
Well, there are opportunities to do these things at conventions, but I don't know how on earth you get even, invited, the first step along the route to do it. Yeah, I just don't know how it works. So, well, maybe somebody listening to this will just reach out to us and invite us to do something. Of course, nobody can meet. I started listening to podcasts, D&D actual play podcasts, because I wanted to learn 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons, right? So when 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons came out, which I think was like 2008,
okay,
something like that.
Yeah,
it was a massive deal, because 3rd edition, which came out in, I think, at the end of the 90s, 99, 2000, something like that, was a huge, great thing, right? And there was this massive proliferation of D&D product and D&D adventuring. There was this kind of explosion of D&D, because they'd sort of fixed the rules, they'd rationalized them. I say fixed, a lot of people would say that they were broken, but what I mean is they'd moved on the 2nd edition rules in a much more kind of rational way. The mechanics, the maths was organized, even if it turned out it was broken with the benefit of hindsight. It was more organized than the 2nd edition maths. And they opened up the system license, right? So the D20 system license, I can't remember what all these different licenses were called, but it was open source rules. So loads of people made source material and extra rules and extra classes. It was just this kind of explosion of stuff. And it was great. It got a little bit tired after a while. And then 4th edition, everybody was like, oh, 4th edition, this is so exciting. What's it going to be like? Now, there are arguments about 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons. There are people who hated it. There are people who loved it. I'm not going to get into that. it didn't scratch our itch, although we played it for a bit. In order to teach myself how to play it, because at that time we were still playing face to face, we were playing in a pub in the West End. I listened to a show called RPG MP3. And all they did was, because there was no such thing as podcast back then, was, well, I mean, sort of not in the organized sense that we have now, is that they would play and record their D&D sessions. They're in Houston or Austin, Texas, or something like that. Dallas, I don't know. Anyway, there's a guy called Hal, who's a British guy. He runs the dungeon. He's the DM, and he runs the adventures for his group, whatever. And they would record them, which at the time was regarded as being an extraordinary idea, and then upload the MP3s of those recordings onto the internet, and you could download them onto your phone and listen to them, which I would do. And I would do in order to listen to them play 4th edition, because that was a way of teaching myself 4th edition, so that when I turned up at the pub the first time we played it as a DM, I would know what on earth was going on, because 4th edition was very different to 3rd edition in a load of technical ways, right? That, I think, is interesting, because that's what got us into actual play podcasts. That's what got me into it. And I still listen to RPG MP3 nowadays. They're still going, and they listen. The only moment I've had that genuinely has made me like, what the fuck, was at some point on Twitter how from RPG MP3 it became increasingly clear he was listening to our program. And I find it very odd that the chap and his group that I listened to, what is it now, 15 years ago, let's say, maybe not quite that much, play D&D on my commute all that time, like in my ears on the tube train, in my ears on my bicycle when I was cycling or wherever, with them playing. They played 4th edition, then they switched to Pathfinder, and they did whatever. And I would just listen to their stuff. It was just like the wallpaper of my commuting for years. He's listening, the poor man, he's listening to us. Isn't that mad? And honestly, Graham, who's one of our players, when I told him that, he almost fell out of his seat. And the two of us are like, we're done now. Johnny can have his Weatherspoons moment, whatever. But Graham and I are like, Hal from RPG MP3 listens to the Billowing Hilltop. We're now happy. Yeah. And it's the only bit of stat I watch for. When our new shows go out, I wait for whatever it is, Texas, to come up on the list, because he's one of our 8 readers, along with Chris Pearson, who you know, Mike Hibbert, Luke, yeah, Lukey baby, yeah. So that's it's fulfilling. Anyway, so that and I got into the Glass Cannon because I needed to teach myself Starfinder, and to teach myself Starfinder, I googled Starfinder podcast. I found Androids and Aliens, which is their sister show, which is the Starfinder show, and then taught myself Starfinder by listening to that, right? Because I was running it at a D&D weekend 3, 4, 5 years ago, something like that. And then as a result, I found the Glass Cannon. And as a result of finding the Glass Cannon, it was like, you really can make these shows. You can edit them. You can record them properly. RPG MP3 is great, but it's very organic. It's, a microphone in the middle of the table. You can do them differently and come up with something which is better. And that's what got us started.
It's interesting, actually, thinking about, I forgot to mention this earlier, because you guys, if you started in 2019, or your first episode was in 2019, you would have been there. You would have been releasing shows before the big bubble. Like last year, the amount of, us ourselves included, the amount of D&D, TTRPG podcasts, actual play podcasts that would have been released, because obviously everyone was stuck inside. They decided, I've never played. Maybe they were playing before, maybe they weren't playing before. But regardless, people were like, okay, if I can't go and do anything, I may as well do something with my time and create something. And that's we had the idea of our podcast before COVID. It was just something we were getting into D&D. Yeah. And one of us, Luke, was very much like, maybe we could make a podcast out of this. We had no idea the amount that was out there.
Nor us. Exactly the same. Yeah, exactly the same. We had no idea.
I said on Twitter yesterday, I think it was, if we'd known, would we have still made the podcast? Would we have thought, well, the market's saturated anyway, does it need another voice? I don't know. Maybe we wouldn't have done it. I like that we did it because...
Is it a market when you're not selling? Well, I don't know.
Well, it's a market in... I know what you mean. It's a market then if you're after listening to a D&D podcast. It's...
The town square is very crowded. Yeah.
But... equally, from our own point of view, ignoring all of the do people listen to us side of it and the work that goes into it, having a podcast has meant we've had responsibility in terms of making sure that we get to play. If we just played for the sake of it, there's a chance that we'd be less inclined to show up every couple of weeks. You know, they'd be like, well, it's just a game. If I'm busy, I'd rather go to the cinema. I'd rather, when we had the opportunity to do so. But knowing that somewhere down the line, these shows had to be released somewhere, you sort of, even though we're months behind and we could have...
Yeah, we're going to say, how far ahead are you? I'd love to know this. This is just, sorry, people who are not interested in this, but how far ahead are you? What have you got in the bank? What's your buffer? Tell me about your show me your buffer.
We are, luckily, I know this information. The episodes that are going out currently are edited from the session we recorded on the 22nd of February. So that's nearly 5 months.
Yeah, so you got more buffer than us.
We basically record every 2 weeks. We record for about 3 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
And each episode is around 40 minutes. So we tend to get 4 to 5 episodes per session.
What?
So
the fuck?
So we're getting 10 weeks out of 1 month.
Fucking hell.
But that was a conscious decision on our part that we wanted to release.
Was it now? Well, that's nice. That's great for you.
But the difference is our episodes are only 40 minutes long. Yours are, nearly an hour and a half each.
Well, some of them are longer. They're shorter now that we've gone weekly because we were doing every 2 weeks. Yeah. We record. We play every Wednesday for 2.5 hours, and we get somewhere between 1 and 2 episodes out of each session. So I would say the par score at the moment is 3 episodes every 2 weeks. So we're just stay ahead. Yeah, we've got up till November in the bank, I would say.
We're not winning, by the way, just because we've got that level of whatever. It's annoying in its own way because
your tone of voice says different. But anyway, yeah.
But no, we get excited about stuff that's happened to us, and we're like, oh, because obviously Sam we've shouted out almost everyone else on the group. Sam does some amazing art for us, and we'll do something, and he'll be like, right, I'm going to draw that, and it's like, okay, that's great, but we won't be able to release that image for months because no one knows what it's relating to.
Yeah, I mean, I do the Twitter, and then the only social media that we really engage with is Twitter. I post updates on Facebook and stuff. Yeah, that is an odd thing where it's like you're talking about stuff that's just weirdly you relive it, and because you're editing it, and because you're uploading the files and you're going through and you're kind of tidying, you are still engaged with it. But it is weird. You're like kind of got this double think thing where you're doubly enthusiastic about 2 separate strands. You're being enthusiastic and you're talking about the stuff that you're about to release and what's going on. You're kind of reminding yourself where you were. And then at the same time, the next week, you're doing something completely, in real life, you're doing, well, it's not real life, but it isn't real life, is it, Nate? No, it's not. If you're doing something completely different. We are recording now. Last week, we recorded episode 63. And the episode that came out this week was episode 47. So we are 16 episodes, 4 months ahead.
That's fine. That's lovely. That's a nice little buffer.
It's not bad. Yeah. Well, there's 2 of us split the edit.
It's nice as well because listening, because obviously because I don't get involved in the editing, I listen back to the episodes as they come out, and it also helps me build into the current story because something might happen that I listen to and go, there's an interesting little story thread there that at the time I missed and meant nothing.
Yeah.
But now I could maybe bring something in that ties into that, and it feels like then it was actually something that I meant to do. And coming to what you were saying earlier about wanting to do separate shows to your main thread,
yes.
we've discussed the possibility of doing one-shots that is in our world, but is not... How can I put it?
Storm King's Thunder is Forgotten Realms, isn't it?
Yes, but it's when I say that world, it's in our story, but it's not officially part of the story. So it might be. So for example, where they are currently, or no, not where they. Yeah, where they currently in the episodes that are being released, they're in Amphale. So when they leave there, maybe some story about the damage or anything that's happened whilst they've been there, some completely unrelated side story.
Very interesting idea, yes.
Builds off of that, and it spirals into its own thing that has nothing to do with what they've done, but in the same way it's been impacted by it. And so
it's the other viewpoint. It's the person standing on the hilltop watching the events go on, and you centering on them and what that means for them. I love that stuff. I'm not going to do it for us, but I have done it before in other adventures where you shifted things around. We have done things. We tend to hand off between each other as DMs, right? And we have done handoff stuff where it's like so and so is running their adventure set in whichever environment and melia thing. I mean, maybe they set it in a published setting, or maybe it's a homebrew or whatever. It doesn't really matter. And then you hand the characters off to somebody else. And we've also done what we do in our little festivals of D&D twice a year. What we call the D&D weekends. They're actually called D&D weekendies, but I'm not going to get into that. And that is basically the gathering of the hilltop, the gathering of the Billowing Hilltop. Is that we run relays. And what I mean by that is that you take these organized play modules, Pathfinder, D&D, doesn't really matter. And over the course of 2 days, you play D&D and you hand off between DMs. And one person runs an adventure which is set 1st to 2nd, 1st to 3rd level. Next person will run something set 3rd to 5th, right? And you will play the same set of characters through all of those sequenced adventures over the course of a couple of days, but handing off to different DMs as you do. And that gives you a different perspective because, right, you're shifting, you're recentering the viewpoint. Everything changes. That's really good fun, and I can highly recommend it. How you turn it into a podcast, which is the first thing I think of now whenever I think about anything to do with D&D, I don't know. But I can see you thinking about. I can see you sitting there. You've got the pen, and you're thinking, "How would you turn that into a podcast?" I'm not quite sure. You could do it because you could do it with different DMs from different podcasts, handing off. Yeah.
Well, this is. I was just going to say that. So that one shot idea that I came up with. The reason I developed that was because somebody asked if they could be on our podcast.
Who was that person? Was it Luke?
It was. I'm sure he won't mind me mentioning it. It was Mosey DM from Twitter. And I said yes, and I wanted to come in. But then it became very clear that, well, how do I bring him in? Because he only knows the story up to episode, at that time, 30. We've had months of gameplay since then, so he's not going to know what's happened here. How's he going to have that context? And also, how do I bring him in? Because as you know, probably from playing, from your weekly sessions, you might have an idea coming up on your next session. You're going to hopefully get to this point in the story, but actually you might not because certain things drag on, or you might even go past it. So how do I then how do I then make sure that I time the right week for him to come on? All of these things, and it became horrible. So then I thought,
so what you want to do? You need to disconnect it.
Yeah. So then I thought, okay, well, what about a story that's set or has implications or relates to this story that I can then bring other people in. We can then do crossovers, like, if you wanted to come in, I could get Mike in, I could get someone else in, and we have that crossover where players from other shows come on, and we've got that nice cross-promotional thing whilst having a bit of fun, whilst playing. And, you then it's low stakes in terms of it doesn't really impact the story, but equally it's familiar to listeners. And it also gets the opportunity of getting other people playing. And I love the idea. And the one reason it hasn't happened yet, editing.
Editing's a nightmare. It's like the same thing. It's like with the Alien RPG thing that I mentioned earlier. I'd love to do it. Who's the fuck is going to edit that? The thing that Paul drips into my ear, like Claudius, the poison dripped into the ear, is Shakespeare reference, readers, is network. There are a lot of us at the moment. I think there are people like Royal Britannia who are properly big, right? And they may be like off in another planet. But there are a bunch of us. I think we are. Again, don't do the false modesty thing again. I think we are probably in a smaller zone of that little group, but I think there is a little group of pretty committed, pretty interesting Brit actual play podcasters, part of this explosion. Maybe we're a little bit ahead of the really massive kind of explosion, kind of the wave from last year. When Paul's always like, when are we going to form a network? When are we going to talk to these people? And when are we going to kind of combine our oomph to do something interesting? And every time he asks me, I say, that's a stupid idea. Because how on earth would you do it? And how would anybody know how to grab the spotlight? It's like, if you do the alien thing, let's take the alien thing as an example. I'm not actually saying we're going to do this, but let's use it as a thought experiment, right? Paul's like, oh, get people on from other podcasts, because then, and I would agree with him on the principle of that, because then you've got cross-marketing opportunities, right? You get Nate on and you get Luke on, yeah? And you get Malrus on from Roll Britannia. And you run the Alien RPG, and all of those individuals are going to go out there and say, we guested on the Billowing Hilltop Plays Alien thing, and that's a marketing opportunity. Well, that's great for us.
Yeah.
But it's not really great, apart from the fact that they get to play a bit of D&D online. It's not really great for the others, right? I mean, all they're really doing is... So what Paul would be saying is, well, what you need to do is you need to divorce the content from a specific podcast, and you need to network it so that, like the Glass Cannon do, I keep going back to the Glass Cannon, they bring in different people, different players, run different shows all under one umbrella, right? And so you do it like that. I just don't know whether or not, as non-professionals, we would get into it, because they all get paid loads of money to do what they do. So
you say, what's in it for you? So let's use that example that you've got, us coming and doing a session, with you guys. Obviously, yes, that means, when that gets released, I'm going to go on. I just recently guested on blah, 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 blah.
Precisely. Yes, exactly. Yep.
But equally, it's on your feed. And equally from that, someone's listening, a Billowing Hilltop, one of the 8 is listening to it. And they go and they say, that Nate's a funny guy. Maybe I'll go and check out his podcast. So
in Norwegian, but yes,
in Norwegian, welcome,
willkommen,
yeah.
Oh, the Nate is funny, yes, yeah.
But it might happen. It might not happen. So it does work that way. But equally, you hope there's a bit of a. You hope that there's a bit of a. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. So you've had me on. Your show
to do an intro. Yeah.
But equally, I was going to have you on here anyway, and this escalated it just because we'd been on yours. I thought, well, it's high time that I get Mike on ours. But coming back to that example, so I came on and play the Alien RPG with you guys, and it gets shared, whatever.
Yeah.
When I come to do a one shot, I say, Mike, do you want to come on board and blah blah blah, and it works both ways.
You scratch my back. I don't want to scratch your back, by the way. I can see you, so it's not going to happen. But that relationship is fine, but it doesn't. You get my point. It's incremental, and it's done in little chunks of kind of cooperation. I think the idea that there are always little podcasts, these Brit podcasts, and we all know each other, and we appear on each other's one shots and stuff in order to kind of cross fertilize is a good thing. But that, I think, works as far as it goes. But I think if you were going to try and do it in a structured way, you need to think bigger. The thing is, none of us want to make any money out of it, so who gives a fuck?
I'd love to make money out of it. Don't put me in
Luke wants to make money out of it. We just don't want to make money out. Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm speaking now for the others, and I'm not. I mean, obviously Johnny wants a free pint, but we've not really ever thought, you can't really make proper money, can you, doing this?
Well, you obviously can, because of the likes of Critical Role, the likes of Glass Cannon, the likes of various others. I've got.
That's like, playing. That's like playing in the corner of a pub and thinking, well, Taylor Smith? Who the fuck's Taylor Smith? Taylor Swift makes a load of money, so maybe we should make a load of money. I mean, I don't know. I think that there's Critical Role. But do you listen to Critical Role? Do you watch it or follow it at all?
No. I did. I had a period when I first started playing, they were one of my go-tos, just because they were the only name I really knew. Actually, the reason I started playing Critical Role was when I was looking for... What was I looking for? I think it was when I was looking for dice. One of the adverts on Amazon for these dice, one of the last slides was from a D&D game, and it had Manganiello and Deborah... what's her name? Deborah Ann Wool. And I was like, oh, they're celebrities I know. They play D&D. Okay, what's that? So then I Googled it and found out it was this thing, some sort of D&D festival that they played a game in. And there was this guy that was a DM for them, and the guy that played fucking Shaggy and Scooby-Doo.
I know who you mean.
I can't think what his name is. That's really annoying me. But anyway, and I saw it and I was like, who the fuck is this nobody that's talking to them and doing this DMing? I've never seen this guy in my life. And then obviously I found out it was Matt Mercer. And then I found out what Matt Mercer was from. And so I thought, okay, I quite like him as a DM. I'm going to see what his show's like. And so I watched a fair bit of their stuff from back in 2015, and I really enjoyed it. I know that there's some detractors of Critical Role, and I really enjoyed it because that's all I'd seen.
I'm in no position to judge. Honestly, I've dipped into it, but not. I'm in no. I think it's an amazing thing, but I just don't watch it.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed it, and I've watched them recently, having now got the context of listening to your shows, indie shows, listening to other bigger shows like NADPod. And a bit of Adventure Zone, listening to other various like big and small accounts, and I've gone back to Critical Role, and I watch it and I go, yeah, there's something here that I don't now like. It doesn't feel genuine to me. It feels like it doesn't feel like it's scripted by any means, but it just feels that they're all too polished.
It's an entertainment property. It's an entertainment property. It's not people playing D&D, which is the thing. Whereas, I promise, I must stop talking about Glass Cannon, but I think Glass Cannon, I don't know that I'm right about this, and I'm very, very rarely right about anything. So, whatever. But my current sense of the landscape of the actual play thing, first of all, you've got video against audio for starters, but then you've got shows where they talk about their cast. They are story forwards. They foreground the story. They foreground the characters. Yes. They are dramas enabled by the mechanics of role play, with sometimes with a kind of figurehead DMs or figurehead characters or whatever. And then on the other hand, you've got people playing D&D around a table and recording it. Now, they could be doing all sorts of shenanigans with that recording. They could be editing it. They could be zhuzhing it. They could be adding special effects. They could be doing, I don't know, you get all sorts of stuff. And I think there's a spectrum. And I think that people tend to have a point on that spectrum. That's my kind of instinct. The thing that I find that I have burbling on in the background when I am commuting or working or whatever is people playing D&D, right? So I tend to, that there's nothing wrong with the other end of the spectrum, but I tend to find that I am on the record people playing D&D part of the spectrum. Whereas I think there are others who feel like they want to watch or participate in or follow a much more narratively focused dramatic event with role-playing mechanics and a game mechanics and the D&D universe or whatever sitting behind it, which is a fantastic thing. It's just I don't know that I don't currently dedicate time to it. I mean, maybe I've changed my mind. I've watched and listened to some Critical Role, and there's some others that are very similar, and I always tend to find that what sticks with me are the simpler shows.
Yeah, and I probably feel the same. So I'm very much I'm getting into Glass Cannon, and I did rally against it at first. Like Luke was a very, very big advocate of it. So just for anyone at home that doesn't know who Luke is, Luke is the original DM for the Dice and Die show. I think he's transitioned into a player at the moment, and he was very much boo Critical Role, yay Glass Cannon. And this was at a time where I was willing to sort of say, oh no, I like Critical Role, blah blah blah. And so there was an element of me, I think, that was just a bit like, I'm not going to like Glass Cannon. I've started into it. I'm only about 11, 12 episodes into it, and I'll admit it's pretty good. It's pretty good. And it's is funny. Probably like you say, it feels at the moment. I don't know how it develops. Obviously, as they get bigger and better, I don't know if it changes. But certainly at the moment I'm at, it feels like a game. It feels like people that are playing a game that just happen to be very good and very entertaining. And I think maybe the thing was, like I say, when I was watching the bits I was watching of Critical Role from like their early years, probably had an element of that. They were still quite raw. They were still quite, chaotic and
that's
whatever.
A very interesting thought. Yeah.
Whereas if you're watching it now, if you're watching their more recent stuff over the years where they've got bigger, they've polished it up, and you're not necessarily getting the same thing. That's not to say that I dislike it or I wouldn't. It's just, I think like you, I've probably got to the point where I enjoy the game and I like listening to people play, and that's what I want to hear. that are also entertaining as well off the back of it. I don't want to hear somebody who wouldn't want to listen to a podcast where they're really good at the game, but they're quite bland and quite sort of like very, rule lawyery, and it's
we have the merit of being neither. We are neither good at the game and we don't understand it.
So incredibly much. Right, listen,
and we're not entertaining. It's just
listen. We've been chatting now for 2 hours, and I've not done any real shout out for your show, so we're going to do that now. This episode has been a bit arse about face, and it's been all over the place. But I'm going to wrestle.
I can fix that for you.
I can wrestle some scheduling back here. Right. One of the things I asked you to do, Mike, is I asked you to bring along with you, all the way from another room, a D20.
I have it. Yes.
Okay. So as I've explained on previous shows, as a DM, you obviously have a charisma modifier of +4. I probably could have upped that to +5, but you have a charisma modifier of +4. I want you to roll that D20. I want you to add four, and that's the amount of words you've got to describe Billowing Hilltop as a podcast.
Okay. The number I came up with was 5. So,
is that 5 plus 4, or is that 5 total?
No. 5, including the 4.
Ooh, a critical miss.
Join friends playing D&D, please. Well, I mean, I've had a massive opportunity to talk about the Billowing Hilltop, and I'm not going to bore anybody about it. I mean, they can just listen to the bloody thing.
Just briefly, what you've mentioned it, but I don't think in any express detail. What story are you playing? You're playing Age of Worms, right?
Okay, so what we did was we've played D&D together as a group since the late 70s. So we've played through pretty much all of the different iterations of D&D, and we played Pathfinder for a long time. If we want to talk about that stuff, then later, fine, but park that. We currently play 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, which we like very much. We struggle sometimes with the rules, not because we struggle with the rules per se, but because we played so many different versions that when somebody has a discussion about whether or not, I don't know, protection from evil works in a particular way, it's now called protection from evil and good, isn't it? Anyway, whatever it is, used to just be called protection from evil. You get my general idea. That we confuse our additions. I don't think we're too bad with that. We're not bad. We're getting better as we go. Right. So we've been doing that anyway. We wanted to start a new adventure, and we were also talking about attempting a podcast, and the two things came together. I Googled best D&D adventure paths, right? And the one that came up that we hadn't played or looked at, there's Rise of the Rune Lords and all the other Paizo stuff, for example. And this is, bear in mind, this is all pre-Storm King's Thunder, Rise of Tiamat, right? Those big Wizards of the Coast D&D 5th edition properties didn't exist when, right? There was this thing called the Age of Worms. And this is where it goes mildly interesting. The Age of Worms was serialized across 12 months of Dungeon Magazine. So back in the day, there was Dragon Magazine, which doubtless you've heard of. No? You've heard of Dragon Magazine, Nate. Oh dear. Okay, no. Well, so Dragon Magazine was the magazine of D&D in the late 70s, 80s, 90s. Google it. It was taken over by a company called Paizo in the early 2000s on a franchise, and they paired it with a magazine called Dungeon. So every month you had Dragon Magazine, which was general discursive stuff and rules ideas and so forth for D&D, officially approved, and then Dungeon Magazine, which was adventures, little modules, little things, some one-shots, some whatever. And Paizo thought that what they would do is they would start producing serialized modules that ran an adventure or adventurers from 1st to 20th. And they released something called The Shackled City, which I've never read. I won't pretend to have. And then their follow-up was this thing called The Age of Worms. So in 2005, 2006, over the course of a year, they released this 12-part super adventure called The Age of Worms, right? Now, the people that wrote that adventure now run Paizo and in fact design Pathfinder. Back then they were franchisees of Dungeons and Dragons and they were supporting Dungeons and Dragons content. When D&D moved on to 4th edition, Paizo were left high and dry. Their license was removed. Yeah. And they had to cast about for something to do. So what they did was they thought, right, well, what we do is we write adventures. We'll keep writing adventures, but now what we need is a rule system to write those adventures for. So we will take the open source bits of Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition and make our own version of Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition with some polishing and some tidying up, and we'll call it Pathfinder. And that's what Pathfinder is. So Pathfinder is the Paizo offshoot of Dungeons and Dragons that they only developed in order for them to keep selling their adventure content. So if you go back a bit, back when they were writing for D&D, that's what we've picked. And we're playing this giant adventure through. I think it's going to take us. We've started book 5 of 12 and we're on episode 63. I can't divide by whatever, times by whatever, but it's going to be a lot of episodes.
About 144-ish.
Something like that. We could have picked anything. We're agnostic. We are enjoying it. It turns out that the online reviews were correct. It is a great piece of work and very enjoyable. So we're enjoying ourselves. That's it. That's the whole thing. We're playing through the old Paizo Age of Worms adventure path. They then went on to do Rise of the Rune Lords. You're looking blank, but for the Pathfinder savvy people out there, there's Against the Giants. There's Giant Slayer, which is what they're playing in the Glass Cannon, for example. There's the Curse of the Crimson Throne. There's loads of adventure paths. That became the stock in trade of Pathfinder, which is on Paizo, which is that they would make these big serialized adventure through plays over a series of whatever, and it was a subscription subscription model. Yeah, that's the way it worked. So that's what we do. Oh, by the way, it was written for 3rd edition, so it's converted to 5th edition.
How do you do that? Because I think you said that either you've said that to me or you've mentioned it on the show. How do you go about converting it? Because obviously I'm such a noob. Like literally, I've literally been playing for a year. I don't know how you go about taking a 3rd edition game. Do you just take the story threads and then throw the rules at it, or?
Well, you cheat for starters. Do you know what EN World is?
I know very little in this world, Mike.
enworld.org is a British news and information site about role-playing games, D&D.
Oh,
with a heavy D&D kind of bent. Morris is the name of the guy, Russ Morrissey, who runs it. It's been around since about year 2000 because it was set up by a guy called Eric Noah, who wanted to publish teaser content about what people knew about what 3rd edition might be like back in the days of 2nd edition, right? Now it's its own thing. The Ennies, which are the awards that are handed out at Gen Con each year for the best roleplay content, the EN bit of Ennies is EN from EN World. That's what that is. It's a fairly big deal, right? I've forgotten your question.
How do you translate 3 to 5?
Yeah. So they have a user. They have a member of their forums who published a conversion document between 3rd and 5th edition for the Age of Worms, which is my Bible, but it only covers you so much. So if you want to, again, I could be wrong about this. This is just the way I go about it. I really don't know, but there are some really easy shortcut stuff that you can do. First of all, don't worry too much about the numbers. So if you're converting from one edition to another and somebody says 5 goblins are waiting for you in a corridor with bows and whatever, well, then just pick the 5 goblins, right? Why do you need to overthink? If you're doing something which is a little bit more complex, the key thing is to look at a creature whose stats are written in another system and not overstress. Just look at what they can do and think, okay, well, what makes them interesting? What's their thing, right? And then work out what that thing would look like in 5th edition. The rest of it doesn't matter, right? If it's their armor classes, say, armor classes tend to be higher in the older editions of the games. When they were ascending armor classes, 1st edition had descending armor classes, Nate, which is going to freak you out, right? So you started unarmored was armor class 10. And you had climbed down to armor class 0, you were starting to look a bit tasty. A really difficult armor class was the armor class -6 or -7, then you were really struggling.
Makes no sense
there we
whatsoever.
go.
What sort of lunatic?
Did at the time,
lunatic would work?
Hey man, it was the 70s, man. It was a totally different kind of like vibe, man. It was different. Yeah.
Ridiculous.
It was a bit ridiculous. It is ridiculous. So that's how you do it. In terms of converting, what I would do is say, if it says it's a hill giant, it's a hill giant. So that's not that difficult, right?
Yeah.
If it's some weird NPC or some weird kind of freaky new monster, work out what it is that they do in the adventure you're converting from that is their signature thing, and work out how to do that in the new thing, and just pick the numbers out of the air. There you go. That's it. Mostly, to be honest, most things you only need 4 numbers. The lazy DM, you only need 4 numbers, right? What's their armor class? How many hit points have they got? Yeah. What's their to hit bonus? I mean, if you're being really kind of brutal about this, what's their to hit bonus? How much damage do they do? That's all you really need. So just pick something that seems about proportionate and then make them exciting with the flavor, not with, don't worry about the numbers too much. Give the fucker 60 hit points, right? Give it 60 hit points. You know, give it an armor class of 16. Give it 60 hit points. Give it a scimitar, which it attacks with a +6, and that scimitar does a D8 plus 4 points of damage. And then think, right, how do I make this thing interesting? Because that's just boring maths.
Well, there you go, boring maths.
It's very difficult to break D&D. If you make some catastrophic decision, you can always change your mind halfway through the combat, have it fall over. You know.
Very true. Which I've done. We've got. No, I won't say because actually it's in a very, very.
No, you shouldn't fudge. I don't fudge dice rolls anymore. By the way, I used to fudge dice rolls, but now I don't because the dice are all out there, online, visible to everyone.
I have fudged. I don't fudge often, but I have fudged, and I will fudge, but not drastically and not offered because I don't.
Fantastic.
Like I said, I want
out of context quote for me to save somewhere else, but yeah.
There you go. Feel free. You may have that one for free. I have no shame when it comes to things that are said on the internet.
To fudging. No, you love to fudge. I understand that. I mean, D&D is like, there's no D&D wisdom. This is the thing, is that I was a little worried this evening that because we talked about how long I'd been playing D&D for and how short a time you've been playing D&D, that this would turn into, let's talk to somebody old about D&D from ancient times. And I was a bit nervous that it would be that. I'd much rather talk about the modern current world of D&D with the people who play it are more interesting. Exactly. I can see you scrubbing stuff out. No, the people who play D&D are more interesting. They're more diverse. This idea that you've got this kind of group of kind of war horses who played through the period where D&D was not socially acceptable, who all sit there and grumble about how, I mean, that's annoying. Isn't that tired and boring? I think it's so positive that it's become much more common currency in the culture, and that the people who are interested in D&D are more interesting people. It's not a monochrome hobby, which it used to be. It really genuinely used to be. I remember Paul, who is one of our group, he met a new person who was partner material, right? And we had a discussion about when they were going to have what we called the conversation. When it was revealed to this person that Paul had a secret, right? And that wasn't that long ago. And the fact that things have moved on, and also that the fabric, the general kind of makeup of the people that play D&D has just diversified and become more interesting. I just think it's massively positive. I'm so positive about that. From having, and I find people who grumble about that and think that modern D&D players don't know they're born, and that the death save mechanic makes it nobody cares about. Oh, I mean, that's such a tired. There are these old school people still who are like, oh, it's not right. It's like, nobody dies anymore, and it's like, it's just like, give it. I mean, seriously, give it a. Why do people need to be negative about other things that people enjoy? It really fucks me off. Why not just be positive about the stuff that you like, and just get the fuck out of the way of people who enjoy doing things that you're not particularly attuned with, apart from Marvel, which is shit.
Oh, right. That's the end of this conversation, I'm afraid. No.
Of course, I'm joking. I know you like it. Many people I know like it. I have been making myself watch them all, Nate.
I know, I heard.
Back to back. and I must admit, I have hit a bit of. There's a bit in Armageddon where Ben Affleck is trying to drill down into the heart of the asteroid to plant the nuclear weapon and save the Earth, where the drill bits keep breaking because he hits a bit of rock that's just too tough to get through. And I've hit the early minutes of Captain America: Civil War, and I have to say, there is a sort of high whining sound as my imagination tries to break through the early parts of that movie, and it's like I've broken 3 drill bits already. Am I going to go back for another go? They're pretending to be spies, Nate, right? Black Widow and Wanda Vision, or whatever the fuck she's called, sitting at cafe tables talking to each other on like secret microphones like they're spies. And it's like, you can fly. You're space people. What is going on? Anyway, like I said, I shouldn't be chippy about stuff I don't enjoy.
No, I'm gonna leave the Marvel conversation there because otherwise it will get unpleasant.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna go backwards in the story. So the last thing we talked about was basically gatekeepers. I think the thing is that they forget is, right, none of us, if me or any of my friends, colleagues, people I know on Twitter, if we're the wrong people for them or we're doing something they don't like, right, we're not taking anything away from them. The games they love are still there. They can still play the games exactly how they want. So okay, yes, some more progressive of us might decide that drows are culturally probably a bit wrong, and that might be, but realistically, if you're the type of person that thinks, oh, well, why are they trying to change that? You probably just play it the way you want to. I'm not saying you should be happy with playing it as a slightly racist game, but if that's really how you want to play it, we're not coming to your table and taking that away from you. We're just saying that, maybe the source book should be a little bit better.
There's a lot to unpack there, Nate. But yes, I know what you mean.
Ultimately, if there's something, obviously the big one that goes around at the moment is the battle wheelchair. It's not really got a place at my table just because we don't have any story that fits there. But that's not to say that I'm against it per se.
Who gives a fuck about the wheel? I mean, who? Honestly, I
exactly. If you don't like it,
bewildering. It's like it's just people want to play pretend versions of themselves, or maybe they don't. Maybe they want to play characters that are nothing like themselves. It doesn't really matter. They can do what the fuck they want, right? If that involves a character who is in a wheelchair, either because they're expressing an idealized anything, I don't understand why it's anybody's business what anybody wants to do, and it's a made-up game. It's like, is every dungeon going to have a ramp in it? Because nowadays it's got to be wheelchair accessible. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? You fucking idiot. It's like, it's just a made up. It's all made up. Why on the earth would you worry? And nobody's stopping you you could sit and lock yourself in your weird little basement if you want and play some, I don't know, sad little thing where it's like, it's very difficult. The stairs are super steep. Thank God nobody's got a wheelchair in this adventure. It's like, what the? It makes me so. That makes me annoyed. Gatekeepers make me annoyed. I know that you're just raising your hand and saying that I'm preaching to the choir or whatever. But I mean, what the fuck? It's so much of that is so annoying, and all that really. How could you not look at that and think, isn't that massively positive that the game has expanded its boundaries so much and that so much is possible with it, that people can express their imaginations in any way they want, represent themselves in any way they want, right? Because that's all it is. And how could you not look at that and think that wasn't a positive thing? How could you look at it and be like, oh, that's a little bit different? It's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Anyway, this conversation's gone somewhere that I wasn't going to get so passionate about, but I really am passionate about this. I find it really, really annoying. I don't try and intervene too much in the stuff that we produce for our show because I think that actively trying to kind of correct, steer, curate the D&D that you play in order to make things work is perhaps not particularly a productive thing to do. I do make sure that the gender balance is a little bit better than it was when the adventure was originally written, for example. The people that wrote The Age of Worms are very positive, forward-thinking people, and at the time they were too. Bullman, Sean K. Reynolds, Eric Mona, the people that now basically run Paizo, who are taking huge steps forward in terms of the way that the game is structured and presented to make it more inclusive for people. And it shows in the adventure they were writing all those years ago, so I don't have to do too much work on that. But I do find it difficult when people are like, yeah, but you could get in arguments about orcs and wheelchairs. I mean, Jesus, what the fuck is the matter with you? Anyway, so you got me ranting there, Nate. This is what happens when you give me 3 beers.
It's a game where you can do anything, and most of us play our tape like almost every table playing.
But how is he going to get up those stairs? How is he going to get up those stairs, though? Right? What's the point of the rim? The point of the rim, Nate, is that wall is a challenge. It's a challenge. It's meant to be a challenge. So fuck off. Do something else then. Spanner. Anyway.
I'm going to leave all of that. I'm okay. That's the end of that conversation.
That's all good. That's all going to come out. So I'm using my northern accent as being an annoying person. I know that Stuart is now going to be annoyed with me because
fuck him. We give him enough shit. Right. I'm going to come back to your podcast, which is what we're trying to talk about. I just wanted to say, right. I know you. I feel like there's a little bit of modesty there that you don't want to talk about it or you don't want to hammer home about it. But I just want to say, I genuinely love your show, and it is one of only a select few. Hang on, just looking. You are one of 3 current, what I would call independent podcasts that I listen to regularly.
There's somebody who doesn't edit a podcast. If you edit a podcast, you'd never listen to anything. I listen to yours. I listen to yours at the moment, right? Because I have room for one. I caught up with the Glass Cannon, so now it's your lot. That's honestly, that's not a made up thing. I'm finding it very funny. I like Stuart. I like the bloke. Is it Quinch? Whatever he's called. Makes me laugh. I'm enjoying it. But I mean, honestly, if you edit a podcast, you spend all your time listening to yourself talk and crunching down audio, and you've just got this time pressure to get it done. So I don't listen. I don't listen to other people's podcasts. It's not.
That's absolutely fine.
It's not. It's not out of anything. It's just like, when are you going to do it?
I'm fortunate enough that I have a job where I'm obviously working from home and I can just have the podcast on. Even when I'm working in the office, I can listen to music at the same time, or in this case, podcast. That's where I churn out a lot of my time on podcasts. And sometimes I don't want to. Sometimes, I'm sort of. The trouble is with actual play podcasts is because it's a story thread. If you zone out and you're not listening to it, you might miss something that's quite important. Then you realise I haven't been listening to this for.
You don't need to worry about that with ours. The players have no idea what's going on from week to week. We have these awful, awkward moments where nobody knows the names of anybody. You don't have to worry about that. You'll get caught up.
But I just want to say, I genuinely, I came to yours relatively late as well. Again, I got yours through Luke, so he's got a lot to answer for.
Yeah.
I came to yours, only fairly recently, a couple of months ago or something like that. And I fell in love with it. There's something. Oh, please, I hope this isn't taken as offensive, but.
Oh God!
When I listen to your show, I get a sense of old school, primetime BBC comedy. There's something a bit goodies about you guys in the absolute possibly best way.
Fuck off the goodies,
but not them specifically.
No, I'm processing that. I'm saying that's positive. I mean, that's probably. I don't think would they bear rewatching now? I bet you there's some awkward moments in the goodies, mate. Oof. Anyway, yeah.
But it's that style of comedy. It's that very sort of quaint, old school British comedy. And and obviously, given everything else, because of a lot of us that are doing podcasts have come to it relatively soon, there's obviously a lot of, please don't take this as offensive. There's a lot of younger generation doing it. And so it's got very much a modern feel. Whereas yours is like, it's got this very quaint British thing about it, and I love that. And it's a unique voice out there because it's quite easy to have had that.
The rest of us are dead, mate. Yeah.
But be a boring podcast with it, and you're not. You're very funny.
Also, there's that element of suspense, right? Will we live? Will the players live long enough to complete the adventure? Right? It's like that is the character's fine, but Paul's not looking great recently, I have to say. And I mean, we've got an awful lot of episodes to get through. Who are we going to? Maybe we should use you. I have to say, you're not looking great either. I know what you mean. We are all my stuff about the spread of D&D, the new universe of it. I am massively supportive of it. we are who we are. I don't think you should change that. We do genuinely sound. We play D&D twice a week. We record one of the sessions. We don't record the other one, right? We genuinely sound like that when we play D&D normally. That's just us playing D&D. Whether or not it turns out to be entertaining for anybody else, we didn't know until we started putting it out there. It turns out 8 people think it's funny, including you. So 7 other people, 7 real people, 7 normal people, right? And no, 6 normal people, you and Luke, right? And so
Right.
it is, yeah, okay. And we did kind of think we would go old school test match special, which you don't understand what the fuck I'm talking about with test match special, do you? Am I bothering?
No.
Sort of, yeah, an old school kind of thing without celebrating being old and British and like grumbling on. We joke about the fact that we've been playing for so long and we don't really still understand what we're doing, and we still haven't grown out of the kind of childish stuff because we started playing when we were kids, so people still argue about who gets the +1 mace of whatever it is. Yeah, that is it. That's what we do, but that's not confected or constructed. That is honestly just us just fucking about. So
I don't doubt it. I there's no way that I ever thought they're putting this on. It's
No.
It's beautiful because I think you have genuinely got a good, enjoyable podcast in itself. I'm enjoying the actual D&D of it, but you as people and characters and the humour that you've got, I just love it. It's very unique. It's unlike any other podcast that I've listened to so far, and that's why it's frustrating for me. Like, genuinely, if you're telling me you only get 8 listeners, I don't know how true that is or not, but if you're telling me you only get 8 listeners, that is
readers.
Sorry, that is one of which is in Norway, which blows my mind. But it is mind blowing because you guys are very, very good. So
okay, I might be making up the 8 a bit, but we're not a big deal. I don't know where to go with this. We're not really interested in anything other than getting Johnny a free pint at Wetherspoons.
But you're not going to get that without the listeners.
Well, I reckon Chris Pearson, who is actually 5. There are 5 readers plus Chris Pearson plus you plus Luke, right? So I reckon we can get Chris, who Johnny doesn't know about the existence of, to sidle up to Johnny at some kind of convention. I mean, basically, my plan is, Johnny will never listen to this because Johnny, well, he'll be asleep. But there's you, right? There's Stuart, Chris, Luke. There's a bunch of us, right, who all chat to each other on Twitter because we have a shared interest, which is why do we spend all our lives producing, preparing for, releasing, supporting these podcasts that don't make us any money? Well, we should all go to a convention together, right, and hang out and have a drink when we're allowed to.
Mm-hmm.
So when we do that, it's going to be easy for us to get Johnny a free pint. One of you just says, I'll give you the money, right? I'll give you the money. It's not going to cost you anything. I'll give you, what does a pint of Wetherspoon cost? Like £1.25. I'll give you like whatever it is. And you could buy Johnny a pint. And then we have achieved our mission.
There you go.
You've been very nice. You've been very nice about us. By the way, one thing I would say, and I don't know that this is true of us, so be very careful here, but my criteria for whether or not I stay or do not stay listening to an actual play show is, am I enjoying being in the company of these people? Because you could listen to anybody play D&D, right? So it's like, am I enjoying the company of the people as they play D&D? Would I like to be sitting in the corner of that room while they're playing? Would I be enjoying myself? I think the most amazing adventure with an incredibly complex and twisty story with fantastic description, and amazing voice acting and everything. If that is what floats your boat, I think that's terrific. And off you go. I think I would struggle to stick with something like that when it became a fictional media thing rather than listening to actual people play a game thing, if I didn't feel like I was kind of entertained by the company of the people participating. That, I think, is where it comes down to. That, right? That's why Glass Cannon works, because they're funny. And every now and again they have an episode which doesn't really go anywhere and it's all a bit annoying, or the combat runs on too long, or all of us do that, right? So really, the whole thing falls over unless you enjoy listening to the people playing. I'm listening to you guys at the moment because I've only got room for one podcast. This is the kind of mutual love fest. No, not that way.
In a good way, just in a good way.
In a normal way. And it's because you lot are quite funny to listen to as you play that's what makes it work. I like Dice and Die for the same reason. And really, audio quality, whether or not you have background effects, whether or not you put the dice in, all the stuff that we were talking about, it's all bollocks. It doesn't really matter. It's whether or not you like listening to the people playing D&D, and it's a combination of do you like spending time in the company of the people, and are you following the story that they are playing through, and the both things kind of going hand in hand to make you entertained. And if you are, you stick with it, and if you don't, then you don't. Yeah. That's my homily on D&D podcasting.
Lovely, and I think that's probably a lovely way, a lovely place to leave that as well. Then,
yeah, I think it is too.
Wonderful.
I'm very glad that we managed to avoid all of the questions that you asked other people about their real lives and what they're like, because I didn't want to get into that, and I've managed to somehow deflect you for God knows how long.
I'll save it until the end. Right, I'm going to do one more thing, and then we're going to close out the show. It's been fantastic having you on here, Mike. And we've talked about D&D. We've talked about so. Last thing we do on the show, I'm going to need your D6, is we're going to play a game of Play Your Bards Right. Excellent. So, as someone who has listened to it by the sound of it, you know what's going on. But for any listeners that have not listened to this before, Play Your Bards Right is essentially a higher or lower game. And I've got a number of creatures, and Mike is going to roll me a D6 to determine which of the key abilities that we are going to use. And from there we start and we do higher or lower. So can you roll me your D6, please?
4.
4, which is intelligence.
Right.
This is the first time
it's ever come up.
So it's fine. It's fine. It just means that you're first to attack intelligence, which is fine. It doesn't really matter. Ultimately, you're all playing against each other, but equally, you're all playing against just the ones in your own field. So we're going to start with intelligence. Right, your first creature.
Yes.
He dropped on the floor. Your first creature, your opening gambit is skeleton with an intelligence of 6.
Yes.
So would you like to go higher or lower than 6?
It's actually really difficult,
Is it?
6 is a bit of a no, because he could pick like ant. I'm going to go higher.
I haven't got ant in here. Right, we have got and I never know how to say this every time it comes out. A satyr.
A satire. It's got a higher. It's a higher intelligence than 6.
It is. Yeah.
You want me to guess 12. The intelligence? Oh, that was what I was going to guess. I was going to guess 12.
Okay, well you can guess them for a little bonus point. Yeah. Okay. So that's your first one. Okay, so higher or lower than 12?
Are these all? No. Okay, you randomly. You've got. Okay, I'm going to say lower. Lower
than 12. What an excellent choice. We've got an owlbear with.
Well, you just gave it away, but I would say it's going to be a single-digit one. I'll say 3.
There we go. It's 3. Yeah.
Animal intelligence. Yeah.
Exactly. So higher or lower than a 3?
Higher. What's the creature? Don't give anything away.
It's a Tarrasque.
Tarrasque. Okay, so that's interesting. It's about the most scary thing ever. I would say that it's got a higher intelligence than. It's either the same or higher. I reckon it's got an intelligence of 6.
It's got the same. Now the rules of this game are you carry on, but you don't get that as a point.
Okay.
So you're not out. You're not dead in the water by any means.
Animal intelligence at 3. Fair enough. Yeah.
So you're still at intelligence of 3. Higher or lower?
Yeah.
Higher.
Yeah.
Higher again. We've got a flumph.
Ooh, that's an interesting one. I'm saying it's got an intelligence of 8.
8. It's actually got an intelligence of 14.
Oh, okay, higher intelligence than me.
That's a mind. Yeah, if the average human has an intelligence of 10, supposedly.
Yeah, but they're dangly, aren't they? Flumps are dangly, aren't they? They're annoying. They're from the Fiend Folio. You don't know what the Fiend Folio is, do you?
Oh, I don't know anything.
Fiend Folio the Fiend Folio was released for first edition Dungeons and Dragons. It was the first British mainstream TSR approved rulebook. So there was the Monster Manual and Monster Manual whatever 2 or whatever, and then the Fiend Folio, which was designed with Don Turnbull, who came over to run TSR UK in the 80s. And they took the monsters out of White Dwarf, which was the UK gaming magazine, the equivalent of the Dragon. And Fiend Folio was where those Githyanki and loads of creatures come out of the Fiend Folio. They're all British inventions, including the Flumph. I'm pretty sure.
It looks British, to be fair. I'm curious as to why you think dangly means intelligent, but there you go. Right, so you got 14.
It's dangly because it floats and it's got dangly stuff coming off it.
Oh yeah, but the way you said it was as if that's what makes it intelligent. There you go.
Yeah.
14, higher or lower?
Lower.
Lower. We've got a gelatinous cube.
Intelligence of 1.
That is correct.
Or is it a full? Or is it a dash? In old school, first edition, it was a dash, non-intelligent. But I'm saying 1.
It is a 1, yeah.
Yay.
So higher. You're not going to go lower than a 1.
No.
We have an adult green dragon.
Fuck off. I would say that we're talking about an intelligence of. So you never know whether or not they've got like super, like they go really high early. I'm saying 16.
18.
Oh, bollocks.
It's a clever bastard. So higher or lower than an 18?
Lower.
Yeah, it's got to be in it. Sturge.
Sturge 3.
All close, 2.
Okay.
Very close. Higher or lower than a 2? You're doing really well.
I'm going to be here forever. Higher.
Well, not that long. We get to 20 and that's the end of it. Higher than a 2, we've got a goblin.
Goblin
with
intelligence of 8.
10.
Oh well. Not bad.
So we're right in the middle.
Lower.
It's got to be. It's a gamble then. Just anything.
Yeah,
Ooh.
Lower than a 10. What's the monster? What is it?
Fire giant.
Shit. That's going to be about the same. I would say 9 or 10.
It's a 10. So
yeah, so I'm still in it, man. Yeah.
It's 10. So higher or lower than a 10?
Lower again.
Lower again. And he's done. He's out.
What is it?
It's a beholder. So you know it's more than 10.
Oh, yeah. It's like really high, like 18, 19, something like that.
17.
Close enough.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You got 7 plus 2 do-overs.
Oh, I see. I'm going to say
That's
not bad.
That's not bad. I mean, our highest score so far is 11 from James from Roll Britannia, but 7 is quite comfortably second place at the moment, and also first place in intelligence. So.
I think we're quite comfortably second place to Roll Britannia, so I think that's appropriate.
As of today's recording, they've got 50,000 downloads across their show. Well done, guys.
We don't have that number. I think it should be fair to say.
We don't have that number.
I mean, we're not miles off, but we're nowhere near 50,000. I mean, you got
the first part. You got the 50.
We got the 50. No, we're not miles off, but we're not 50,000. Overall, I mean, all downloads of all time. I don't know what you guys are on. We're not going to talk about it, but no, we're not at 50 grand. But we're, even with 8 listeners, if you have X number of episodes, you're going to start hitting some numbers. We've done really well recently. We've massively jumped recently, and we finally hit the podcast charts. And now, if you look on, well, it's topped almost immediately. But if you open your Apple podcast thing and you go to games or whatever it is, we were on the list. It was like Critical Role, You Meet in a Tavern, all of that lot. Scroll, Glass Cannon, scroll. But, in there, us.
You were there. We've never actively checked for us. So I don't know if we're there, when we're there. I don't know.
I got an email from whatever it is, the thing, the service that monitors your stats, that said you got to check this. So I went in and had a look, and I almost fell off my chair. But we're not in it anymore. You only last for about a moment, and you last for
no more than a melee round, and then you're out.
Roll Britannia are in there quite comfortably, quite regularly. So fair play to them. Well done, guys. James, who's been on this show, is a wonderfully lovely human being, and well done to him and his crew. And that's all I'll say, because I'm a fucking jealous bastard.
I don't. Why would you be jealous if you don't? I mean, I'm sure they make a bit of money out of it. I mean, they do a good thing. The show is good. Their marketing is good. They are exactly in the sweet spot in terms of like new, old school, whatever. I think it's fantastic. I just think it's great. I mean, they do numbers, but you do numbers. We do numbers. We're not. I don't know about you, but we're not miles behind them. We're just.
I'm jokingly envious of them. I think the thing is, and who did I say this to? It may have even been him, James. That at the end of the day, as much as I talk about the market saturation and how many podcasts there are and everything, I think the beauty of what we do is, whilst there's obviously a huge amount of overlap in terms of we're all playing a TTRPG and recording it, we're all telling completely different stories. And ultimately, you mentioned earlier. What was I going to say? You mentioned earlier about the dice being fate, and one of the things that really, I don't want to get too buried into this, but one thing I love about D&D and TTRPG in general is how different a story can be just because of the roll of a dice. That literally, if I listen to someone else playing Storm King's Thunder, not only have you got different personalities that might choose to do something, but you could literally get to exactly the same point in the story and choose to do exactly the same thing. But because someone's dice rolls an 18 and one dice rolls a 3, it passes or fails, and you've got to, and that's it. It's diverged from that. And you've got completely different thing.
We don't fake the dice, by the way. They're real dice. We just make sure that the noise of them goes into the podcast.
Well, not the noise of them. The noise of a set of dice.
The dice. We record each individual. We record actual dice. And then the system listens for what we're rolling and reaches into the library and rolls and plays an actual dice sound from the dice we're rolling. I'm not making this up. We really do that. We are that sad. So if you hear the sound of a D20 rolling on our show, that is an actual D20 that we're rolling, and it's just picked up and played into the audio so that we've got the dice. Because we just thought early on, if you can't hear the dice rolling, you don't get the reactions to the dice, then the fabric of reality is not being communicated.
What a lovely way to end a podcast.
Yeah, right. I'm off for a beer.
Thank you very much, Mike, for joining me on this podcast of podcasts. Please, everyone, go and listen to Billowing Hilltop and listen to Mike do his thing with the rest of his group. And yeah,
it's very different.
It is very different. I
mean, it's very different to this because I actually stopped talking on our show.
You edit out the talking. I will be back in a few weeks' time with, hopefully, Declan from Romancing the Dungeon for the season finale of DM DMer.
I'm interested in them. Yeah, okay. Well, thanks very much, Nate. That was great.
No worries. All right, see you soon. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button on your favourite podcast app to ensure you don't miss any future instalments of Dice and Desire. And in the meantime, if you want to interact with us, come and find us on Twitter and Instagram at Dice and Desire.
We're going to give it another go. It's a bit more zing. A bit of zing. Zing. Yeah. Ready? Hello. With a hello. No. Hello. Wait till I get through the whole thing. Ready? Hello with a Billowing Hilltop.
Hello.
Oh dear. Waiting to get through the whole thing. No, I mean...
I thought that was the whole thing.
The whole thing is hello with a Billowing Hilltop. Okay, that's the whole thing. Yeah?
Okay. That was right.
That pretty much sums up the show. But if you want to find out any more, you can visit us at www.billowinghilltop. Is it com? Does anybody know?
.org.
Is it?
It's .com.
What do we do? What do we play?
There's monsters.
Does anybody remember?
Walking around.
I don't know.
And, yeah.
We will be delighted if you were to join us around our table as we play Dungeons. Is it 5th edition? Hello?
Yeah, we think so.
Yeah. Yes. We play Dungeons and Dragons.
In the background?
Sorry, that was me. What was that noise in the background? There will be noises in the background as we play Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition through the classic Paizo adventure path, The Age of Worms. You can expect this. No! Quite a bit of this.
I'm completely lost.
This. This.
I've got a bugbear in my underpants.
And one of these.
Oh dear.
We're on Apple Podcasts and we're on Spotify and we're on TuneIn, and you can find us on Twitter and you can find us on Facebook. And we hope you join us. Thanks very much.